Bulletin continues. And military housing has reached a new low, with MPs warning our armed forces and their families now live in accommodation that's no longer fit for purpose. And an incredible two-thirds of the accommodation is deemed unfit for purpose. The Defence Committee Chair will be with me shortly in the studio to explain why on earth we are failing the British Armed Forces in their housing. And of course it's Christmas, and so Mick the Grinch Lynch has struck once again as train strikes threaten thousands of families to try and reunite for their Christmas. Avanti West Coast are the latest company to introduce a reduced timetable, and guess when? December the 22nd, the 23rd and the 29th, right bang on the middle of the festive season. But who is really to blame? And that's all coming your next hour. The Farmy Army is out in force. In fact, you can hear them from the basement here in Westminster. I was out on the streets of Westminster a short while ago. Deafening noise out there. The farmers give me the horn. They were blasting out their tractors. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. They warmly welcomed us at GBNews. And shortly I'll be joined by one of the organisers, one of the leaders of that, to get from them. What do you expect the government will do? Will they listen? Will there be a U-turn? Or might the farmers ramp up their action? That's all coming. But first, get in touch, use your way, gbnews.com/your say. But now your headlines. Here's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much. Good afternoon to you. It's just gone 3 o'clock. Well, the top story this afternoon. Sara Sharif's father and stepmother have been found guilty of her murder after what prosecutors call a brutal campaign of abuse. The 10-year-old suffered over 70 injuries, including fractures and burns, before her body was discovered in her Woking home last August. Her father admitted to beating Sara with a cricket bat, but denied intending to kill her. The father and his wife fled to Pakistan with their family after her death, but were arrested on their return to the UK. They'll be sentenced next week, with an inquest now set to examine failures by the police, the social services and the courts. Hundreds of farmers have descended on Westminster today with their tractors as the government insists its support for the sector is steadfast. Last month, over 13,000 people rallied against the changes to inheritance tax, but despite the protests, the government says they won't be changing course on their policy. Today, farmers are warning the proposed changes could kill British farming.
This is the death of farming that's going to happen under this government. So we want to mark that, but once we get to Parliament, you give them what for. We're here to make a noise. This is a war, we will win, and the government will do a U-turn. That is determined by all of us to push that.
Meanwhile, inside the Commons, Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch clashed today over immigration at Prime Minister's questions. The opposition leader criticised the Prime Minister's record on immigration. But Sir Keir Starmer hit back by accusing the Tories of losing control of the borders.
I'm glad she now wants to talk about immigration. Last week she said she didn't, and for good reason, because the previous government presided over record high levels of immigration. The figures just a few weeks ago, nearly 1 million on net migration. That is unprecedented. A one-nation experiment in open borders under the last government. And she was the champion. She stood up and praised the then Tory Home Secretary for listening to her on removing caps on migration visas. So she was applauding it. Now she's furious about what she was campaigning for. We will drive it down. We will drive down lawful migration. We'll drive down illegal migration.
In other news this hour, a ban on puberty blockers for children with gender dysphoria in the UK is set to be made indefinite after experts warned of an unacceptable safety risk. The government said that following official advice from medical experts, existing emergency measures banning the sale and supply of the drugs outside of clinical trials will now stay in place. Health and Social Care Secretary Wes Streeting said there is a need to act with caution, and he says follow the expert advice in caring for this vulnerable group of young people. And just before we head back to Martin in Westminster, an 18-year-old man has been sentenced to 1 year in jail in Dubai for having a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl. That's according to a campaign group. Marcus Fakana from Tottenham was with his parents in Dubai in August when a holiday romance reportedly blossomed with another Londoner who has since turned 18. After returning home and seeing pictures and chats, the girl's mother reported the relationship to Dubai police, who then arrested Fakana at his hotel. Sex with another person aged under 18 is illegal in Dubai. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in around half an hour. Now, though, it's over to Martin.
Thank you very much, Sam. Now, furious farmers have descended on Westminster today to continue their protests against the government's changes to the inheritance tax grab. And this is the latest in a number of UK-wide rallies over the last few weeks, with an estimated 20,000 farmers arriving in central London over the past month alone. Now, one farmer made it very clear what he thought about the government's attitude towards British agriculture.
This is the death of farming that's going to happen under this government. So we want to mark that. But once we get to Parliament, you give them what for. We're here to make a noise. This is a war, we will win, and the government will do a U-turn. That is determined by all of us to push that.
That was Matt Cullen there, of course, and also Liz Webster, great friends of the show, and the organisers of today's event. We hope to get them into the studio later on today. But here's a big question. Are they getting their message across? Let's go now to GBNews presenter Patrick Christys, who is in the thick of the protest now. Patrick, are you still able to hear us? It's deafening out there. Tell us about the mood on the ground.
Well, look, I'll tell you what, the mood on the ground is absolutely sensational, really. We've got rest in peace British farming, we've got floats like this, tractors all over the place here. Fictitious figures will destroy a country. People have been tooting their horns all the time. There we go, give it a blow. There we are. But if you want to know what the whole point of this day is about, let's talk to an actual farmer. You, sir, what's today been all about?
Trying to persuade Keir Starmer and his government to back down on the IHT bill.
Yeah.
Because we've been stabbed in the back too much. We've finally had enough. This is not the end. There'll be plenty more. We can do far more than what we did today.
Yeah.
So, yeah, brilliant.
Well, there you go. I mean, the message has been loud and clear here. I'm going to bring in a political figure that you might recognise now. It's Richard Tice. Richard, in that House of Commons earlier today, whilst we had hundreds and hundreds of farmers tooting their horns, making themselves heard, I mean, Kemi Badenoch went off on immigration, didn't she? It was unbelievable.
I mean, it was utterly inept for the second week running. She completely messed up. 500 plus tractors here. The farm tax, the grief tax, it's a catastrophe, and the clueless, useless Kemi Badenoch and her team went off on their weakest thing, which is immigration. This is the big thing. I mean, look at this over there. I invented that word, Starmageddon. That's what's going on.
Starmageddon, they're saying. Yes, Starmageddon. So
the Tories are completely out of touch.
Well, just come with me. Let's see if we can just get in a tractor quickly, Martin. All right, I don't know if we can. Sir, can I have a quick word with you? Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Why are you here today?
We're just protesting about this grossly unfair tax. It's a lazy tax sorted up by people that can't think of anything better.
So you don't think they understand the British countryside? Is it going to have an impact on you, mate? Is it?
It will have an impact on my future because it's just going to be too expensive to be able to take over the farm. It's just ruining our futures and everyone else below us.
Right, OK, all right. Well, look, good luck to you all, obviously, and I'll leave you to it because you better go on. I don't know, could we get a toot of your horn? Is that possible? Oh, a little one. It was a little one. There you go. OK, well, take care. Well, look, Martin, you can get a flavour of the action here. They've been going all day. They've been absolutely chock-a-block. And Lucia, my wonderful camera operator, has done her best not to get run over. So I think we might as well call it quits while we're still alive, Martin.
Beautiful stuff. Patrick Christys there, right in the thick of it in Whitehall. Thank you very much. And one of the farmers who was there today joins me now in the studio. It's Clive Bailey. Clive, great friend of the show. You've been in now numerous times. Thank you very much. So let's start on the protest today. Do you think that your message is getting across, or do you think that the Labour Party, Parliament and the Parliament are going to continue ploughing the same furrow? And they've come out today with an announcement. They claim they're injecting £343 million more into the rural economy. There's millions of pounds going into the countryside, £5 billion of the farming budget. What do you got to complain about?
Well, what a coincidence they announced that same news. It's not new, any of that, really, on the day when all these tractors come to London. You know, those numbers, it's political spin again, nothing more than that. £5 billion, a 2-year commitment or whatever. First off, in real terms, that £5 billion isn't the largest amount ever committed to agriculture. In fact, in real terms, and we've had costs rise 40% in the last 3 years alone, in real terms, that's not, by a long way, not the most committed to agriculture. It's also a 2-year commitment. I don't think any government before has only ever committed 2 years at a time. Normally you get at least a term of Parliament, 5-year commitments, often longer than that. So it's how can you plan a business with a 2-year commitment from a government? They're not listening. They don't understand, actually. It doesn't matter how much money they put into agriculture if there's no farmers left because we'll have to sell our farms to pay inheritance tax over the next generation.
And Clive, I was down at the protest earlier on myself. I walked to the length and breadth of Whitehall. A carnival atmosphere is how I would put it for now. The farmers were very appreciative that GBNews were there. They were tooting their horns. They seemed in a jubilant party atmosphere. And yet I spoke to a few of the lads on the ground and they were saying this is a ramping up. So first it was 20,000 on foot. Now it's the machinery. The big question is, what next? Will the Queensberry rules, will the party atmosphere keep working?
Well, yeah, the gloves are slowly coming off, aren't they? It's pretty clear to see. Yeah, I didn't think when we organised the thing on the 19th, I didn't think we'd be back quite so soon.
Yeah.
Bringing tractors, again, the people was that initial display of kind of strength and showing, proving it's more than the 500 a year that they say it's going to affect. It's way more than that, clearly. Now bringing the tractors along that Matt Cullen's organised, I think that kind of demonstrates the logistics and, again, the strength of feeling behind farmers. It's peaceful. You know, you'll notice no one bought muck spreaders like in France or straw spreaders or anything disruptive. It's had, as you said, a very carnival atmosphere, very friendly atmosphere. I think talking to people in London I've been around today, they kind of seem happy and almost excited to see the tractors at the moment. But if the government don't start to listen, sit down, have proper conversations about this, it's going to get increasingly tense. There's fractions of farmers that want to get more French, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
Increasingly, that's the mood. And I think, you know, in the new year, things could get much more disruptive and a lot less friendly. And I don't think anyone wants to see it go that way. There's no need for it to go that way. The government won't win if it goes that way because of the huge amount of logistics farmers have behind them. So they really do need to sit down at a table with farmers and understand the problem properly.
So, Clive, you're saying there were no muck spreaders today. There were no dumping of manure at Downing Street today, but you're saying that might happen. That's how some farmers don't want to feel.
They're desperate in desperate situations. A lot of them feel like they've got nothing to lose. You know, I think it's incredibly important as farmers that we keep public support. Yeah. That's the key to listen. You know, to getting that government to listen. But you know, no individual groups are organising or controlling all of farming. There are groups of farmers that are determined to be, as I say, a lot more French about things.
Clive, can I show you a clip? I think you get make sure your earpiece works.
Yeah.
I'll show you a clip of Keir Starmer. He spoke to the National Farmers Union before the general election. Let's have a listen to what he said, and then I'd like to get your reaction to it, please.
Every day seems to bring a new existential risk to British farming. Losing a farm is not like losing any other business. It can't come back.
I mean, losing a farm is not like losing any other business. It cannot come back.
Yeah.
That was before the election. Quite a different position now.
Just words again, isn't it? You know, talk's cheap. We've seen the actions in that budget, and it's pretty clear that you're going to lose farms. Multi-generational businesses are going to end up having to sell to pay a tax that's impossible to pay out of the almost embarrassingly small return on investment on the capital that's involved in a farm. So, you know, he clearly doesn't get it, or he's reading a script, or it's all sound bites, but it's just not how it really... Yes, it's not the reality for these family farms.
Do you think it's fair to say, throughout this movement, people like yourselves, Clive, people like Matt Cullen, people like Liz Webster, people like Ollie Harrison have become like new leaders, new standard bearers? Is there a new movement, do you think, forming in the British agricultural community? Is there a feeling? Jeremy Clarkson said the National Farmers Union said he was no longer welcome, no longer spoke for them. Effectively, he said, I've been sacked. He said that in his column in the Sunday Times. Is there a feeling, would you say it's fair to say, that the NFU, who do a huge amount of work for British farming, let's not forget that, but are they too cosy to government? Is there time for something a bit more radical?
There seems to be a huge lack of organised leadership at the moment. So that's what's forced people like me and Ollie and others to kind of step into that role, I guess. None of us want to do that. We don't have any other wider agenda. We don't have the financial backing or members behind us that the organisations like the NFU, etc., do. But it's pretty clear that if there's a time for strong leadership, it's now. And I think the traditional relationship between organisations like the NFU, which they're not really a union anyway, they're a lobby group, and that's why they don't call strikes and those kind of things. I think that traditional role of lobby, it doesn't seem to be, to me, working anymore. I mean, I've not been an NFU member for I think 10 years now. I became quite disillusioned with them over the kind of lack of action over farm assurance that leads to a very difficult situation with us trying to compete with imports of lower welfare standards. But I think that there's definitely a space for it. We're all busy trying to run our farms and businesses. Where do we find the bandwidth for this? It was, I didn't do a lot of work leading up to 19th, that protest, for instance. So it's a difficult position to be in, but something's got to happen here. It's not going away, and it does need a better overall coordination, because at the moment what you've got is various little satellite groups of farmers organising things, and doing their own little things because they need to express this to government. If it was all joined up, it would be a lot better, a lot more effective, I'm quite sure.
But yet things have changed. We've had you in before with your beautiful boy, Henry, 12 years old. He wanted to carry the mantle to become a farmer, and when you and I first connected, it was because you wrote that, I thought, was heartbreaking piece about the fact that 3 generations of farming, farm started by your granddad, might crumble down because of this new legislation. That bond might be broken, and I can see you getting emotional about that now. Yeah. That's what drives you. Yeah. That's what's driving this movement. So things have changed. And so, therefore, no, the mood has changed, the rhetoric has changed, and perhaps it's time for a different approach. Yeah, well,
as you say, on a piece of paper, we own this land, and this land that land has become incredibly valuable, not because of farmers, not because of the returns from farming it and growing food on it, but because of these, wealthy investors that they've tried to target this tax, but they've got it wrong. They've caught all the genuine family farms in the crossfire, and they haven't made any less attractive to those generations. So, yeah, it does spell the end of that multi-generational thing, and that's quite sad that my son won't get the opportunity. I'm a custodian of that land for the next generation, like my father was for my grandfather, and I'm the custodian for Henry and his brother William if they wanted to take that route. But I'm going to be the generation that ends up failing that, because I will have to sell to pay the tax.
But there could be hope. Would you be open to the idea of brokering some sort of compromise deal? The Labour Party, they probably can't do a U-turn, can they? No. They've set their stall out now. But could there be a way of means testing? For example, they could have done that on the winter fuel allowance. So could they say, for example, if they want to target these big landowners who are the landed gentry, who have millions and millions of pounds, then they could means test that, and that would exempt people like yourself. Is that a potential solution, rather than it kind of being binary? Is there a way through the middle for everybody?
Of course it is. There are so many there's means testing. There's many other mechanisms that you could sit down and go through. It's not hard to identify the people, a very small amount of people, by the way, that are abusing the system at both ends. There's abuse at the bottom with people buying lifestyle kind of houses, and I think you would agree, as well as Keir Starmer would agree, that those are the people actually that should be targeted. Of course they should, because they're abusing the rules. But you're getting caught in the crossfire. Exactly. The family farms. Clarkson put it quite well at RA, didn't he? He said that they needed to use a sniper rifle to take out precisely those individuals that are abusing the system, that aren't paying their taxes. I think we all want to see that. But they've taken a blunderbuss to it and taken out all of these family farms instead, and that's just not it's not the solution, and it's not going to be good for the economy. It's not going to grow our economy. It's going to destroy the countryside, I just don't think anybody wants to see that. So. Right, Betty, once again, amazing, and thank you very much for joining us in the studio at GBNews. I'm going to shake you by the hand, as ever. Thanks, good luck to your beautiful boy. Thank you very much. Thanks, Martin. Stick around for now, because it's time for our biggest and great British giveaway this year, and your chance to win £50,000 in tax-free cash. It's the biggest cash prize that we've ever given away, and it could be yours. And here's the details that you need to win a whopping, mouth-watering 50 grand tax-free cash.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Still a way to Clive here about how to solve this farming crisis. Inspiring stuff. But coming up, we'll delve into the real state of housing for our armed forces, as MPs warn that the current sites aren't fit for purpose. As many as 2/3 of them aren't fit for purpose. It's astonishing. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
Phil Kearsey is bringing a new flavour to the Michelin-starred restaurant Pied à Terre as he becomes its new executive head chef. Customers can expect a menu that showcases modern British cooking, accompanied by classical French roots, which uses hyper-seasonal ingredients. What are hyper-seasonal ingredients? That's an interesting phrase.
It's more about just reacting to the seasonality of everything. We like to change the menu all the time. So basically, I surround myself with the best suppliers, and they tell me what's amazing at the moment, and then we try and celebrate that in the restaurant in many different forms, using taste, texture and technique, and just try and celebrate something as humble as a broccoli stem or a cauliflower, using absolutely everything, and making sure we've got an ever-changing menu. So letting the seasons dictate, so it's never boring and we never get menu fatigue.
OK, your career has taken you around the world a bit.
Yeah.
For example, you were in the United States. What did you learn there?
So, every chef I've worked for, it's about to take something from. A lot of chefs will go places and just stay in one establishment and get to the top, and then that's it. I've kind of then went to another chef to learn completely different things. That's the brilliant thing, to be able to surround myself with such amazing chefs throughout my career, because I've learned different things from all of them. And you find out 5 different ways to do something, and you find the way that you like it the best. And it's also about understanding it takes a while to understand how the restaurant is, going through the history of all these amazing chefs that have been before me, the style, because it needs to make sense. You wouldn't have a dish that should be at the Fat Duck and then a dish that should be at the Waterside, you know. You need to make sure that it all makes sense and it goes together with the decor, the service, the wine serving. And so we want to be the restaurant, not that does a little bit of everything, we want to be the best French restaurant in London, you know.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:23 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, I just want to go through your says. You've been getting in touch in your hundreds about the farmers' strike. Many of you are very, very inspired by what's going on out there at Whitehall. David Crabb has said this: I'm loving the noise and the sheer defiance of these farmers. Proper British backbone on full display here. But let's not kid ourselves with nostalgia and noise alone. The plight of British farmers isn't just about tractors parading through Parliament. It's about a government doing what they should. Casey Barr doesn't agree. No real farmer will be able to take a day off, especially during the week, they say. I'll also need to get new tyres, and God knows how much they spent on fuel. I think, Casey, they're probably saying it's worth sacrificing a day today so that there is a future. That's what Clive Bailey was saying. No, they didn't want to do this. They were thrust into a situation, but they felt compelled to act. These are people who have never been political in their lives. They've never been involved in anything like this in their entire lives, but they feel that taking to the streets to get action is the only way forward. Somebody here says, what a shame if an ambulance gets stuck here and then the hard-working people of Britain get stuck. How come GB News is behind the farmers when they were criticising Just Stop Oil? Well, you know, it's a fair point, but this protest again had full approval. It's a legal protest. I went out and walked amongst it myself. It was very, very well-natured. The police were smiling, the farmers were smiling. It's a very, very well-natured protest thus far. And Quincy adds this: splendid noise. I hope Sir Keir Starmer can hear every second and every decibel of it. Well, trust me, we can hear it down here. We're 2 floors underground, and we can hear them from down in the GB News basement. Thanks for those. Now let's move on, because the real and desperate state of housing for our armed forces has been exposed by a group of valiant MPs who claim that some personnel are living next to serious damp and mould. And the Defence Committee also says that many sites are already unfit for purpose and have warned that thousands of personnel could leave the armed services if these issues are not sorted out and quick. I'm delighted to join in the studio now by Tan Dacey MP, who is the current chair of the Defence Committee. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. So this report, 55 pages, it's called Service Accommodation. It's got some, I think, very, very concerning revelations. Tell us more.
Well, look, firstly, many of us were shocked by the state of the service accommodation in terms of it became apparent to the Defence Committee, which had launched this inquiry, by the way, since last year. We have managed to expose just the dire state of service accommodation. So whether it was damp, mould, issues of rat infestation, issues with heating, with not having sufficient washing and cooking facilities, and it's become apparent that we are not providing homes fit for heroes. So that is why it's now incumbent on the government to make sure that they set out a timeline and we have funding. So Treasury and the Ministry of Defence need to get together to deal with this issue, because otherwise it will have a damaging effect on recruitment and retention. Recruitment and retention, by the way, within our armed forces is already in a bad state. And also this has an impact on morale. Some of the survey findings that we found was that a third of people living in family services accommodation were living in substandard accommodation, 2/3 for single living accommodation. So that's impacting about 50,000 in terms of the service family accommodation, and about 133,000 who are living in single living accommodation.
It's heartbreaking enough that anybody should have to live in these circumstances in modern Britain, Tan. And yet, for armed services personnel, as you know, better than most. Now, these are people who are prepared to die for their country, travel the world, supporting those who are prepared to die for their country. And to hear that 2/3 of them are in such poor condition, they're essentially no longer fit for purpose, it's heartbreaking. So there's a big job ahead. Where does that start and what will it cost?
Well, look, as you said, those people who are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for us, for our country, it is incumbent on us to ensure that we don't just talk about homes fit for heroes, that those are actually delivered. Now, I know that this is an issue dating back decades. So the Defence Committee report outlines how some of the sale of the accommodation in the 90s, the issues then exposed by the Public Accounts Committee, which said that the exchequer, the taxpayer, could be billions of pounds worse off as an account of that. All of those things are highlighted in our committee papers, in that report. What we now need is serious action. It's no point just talking about it. We need the Ministry of Defence, and in particular, the DIOs, that's the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, to get to grips with the problem, because otherwise, those brave servicemen and women will literally walk. Why should they be serving our country if they're not being valued? So they need to be treated with respect and dignity, and that is why it is important that we've looked at the various issues. For example, some of the things that were coming back to us was that the allocation process, recently, by the way, it was very botched, mishandled by the MOD. Then we've got issues around people feeling like it's a lottery, that it's just pointless. These were the findings coming out. So now the MOD knows the extent of the problem, and it now needs to set out a timeline.
It's a question of priorities, isn't it? I mean, I read in your report it's going to cost at least £1 billion to get this going, but we spend £6 billion on asylum. We spend £4 million a week on hotels for asylum seekers. And let's be brutally honest, the conditions you're talking about here are conditions that no doubt human rights lawyers would complain about were not fit for asylum seekers. People were moved off the Bibi Stockholm for less than this. Why are our armed service people living in conditions that the human rights lawyers wouldn't say are fit for an asylum seeker?
Well, look,
armed forces people are back of the queue.
That's it. Well, look, I've often raised the issue that we should be housing asylum seekers not in hotels, not in expensive accommodation, but in homes that are fit for that particular circumstance. So some of the failings, I know the government will point out to some of their inheritance, what's happened in previous years, but now we know that the problem will obviously take billions to resolve, but the inaction will cost us even more. So if we don't invest in that, some of that housing will become so dilapidated, it will become completely uninhabitable. So it's incumbent on the government and the DIO to set out that timeline, set out the metrics, and let's have homes fit for heroes.
Totally agree. Now, as I have you here, you would have walked through the farmers' protest on your way into the studio today. They're happening right outside. You can't miss them in terms of the noise. Do you think that noise, though, is resonating with the Prime Minister? Do you think that there's going to be some form of compromise? I've had one of the farmers' leaders, that bumped into Clive Bailey on your way in. They seem like they want to sit down and talk. They agree with the notion that the wealthiest landowners who are gaming the system should be targeted, means tested, but smallholders getting caught in the crossfire are paying the price. Do you think there should be a compromise to protect British farmers?
Well, first of all, I think we need to value our farmers. As the saying goes, no farmers, no food.
Yes.
From somebody whose parents actually tilled the land back in the Punjab in India before they emigrated in the 70s, I have got a very soft spot for farmers. I want to make sure that farmers get the best possible support that they can.
But they're not getting that now. That's what they're telling us.
That's why it's incumbent on any government. I know under the previous government there were lots of complaints, lots of issues with regards to how trade deals were struck with Australia, with New Zealand and elsewhere, how some of the farmers thought that they got a raw deal. What we now need to do is to make sure that the government is actually targeting those city folk, in fact, rather than rural folk, city folk who are trying to circumvent the process whereby they don't need to pay inheritance tax. They are then buying up huge tracts of land. What that's actually meant is that the price of farming land for farmers has become too high. So that's what we've got to stop. And I am sure that the government will be listening to these voices, and we're making sure that they have a formula that preserves our farming culture and has that support for farmers going forward.
Well, pardon the pun, but your onions, Tan Dacey. Please have a word with the Prime Minister, because the farmers want to talk, they want to compromise. It sounds like you did too. I'll shake your hand.
Thank you.
Good lad, thank you very much. That's Tan Dacey, of course, the chair of the Defence Committee, also the MP for Slough. Thank you very much. Pleasure to have your company. Now, lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including the latest on potential terrorists being released from Syrian prisons following the collapse of the Assad regime. But first, here's your headlines with Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you from the newsroom. It is 3:33 exactly. Well, after years of what prosecutors called horrific abuse, 3 members of Sara Sharif's family have been found guilty today over her death. Her father, Sara Sharif, and her stepmother, Bainash Batul, were found guilty of the 10-year-old's murder, while her uncle, Faisal Malik, was also convicted of causing or allowing her death. The 10-year-old suffered over 70 injuries, including fractures and burns, before her body was discovered in her home in Woking last August. The 3 will be sentenced next week, with an inquest now set to examine failures by police, social services and the courts. Speaking earlier, Detective Chief Inspector Craig Emerson said the case has shocked and horrified people around the world.
Sara's young life was brought to an end as a result of the brutal abuse and unspeakable violence inflicted on her by Sharif, Batul, which Malik did nothing to prevent.
Thousands of farmers have driven their tractors into Westminster today, demanding the government rethinks plans to impose a 20% inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million. Chancellor Rachel Reeves insists most farmers won't be affected, but critics say the changes threaten livelihoods, heritage and food security. Earlier, protesters held a minute's silence for those that have been lost due to stress and financial pressures. And calls for a pause and consultation are now growing louder. But Downing Street says the policy won't change.
This is the death of farming that's going to happen under this government. So we want to mark that. But once we get to Parliament, you give them what for. We're here to make a noise. This is a war. We will win. And the government will do a U-turn. That is determined by all of us to push that.
A ban on puberty blockers for children under the age of 18 in the UK is now indefinite after experts found their use posed an unacceptable safety risk. The Commission on Human Medicines recommended that restriction remains until further evidence ensures the drug's safety for children with gender dysphoria. Baroness Cass, who led a review into children's gender care, has welcomed the move, describing the drugs as powerful with unproven benefits and significant risks. Support is now being offered to families affected, while the NHS says it plans to open 8 new gender identity clinics by 2026. And a British teenager jailed in Dubai is appealing a 1-year sentence for having a relationship with a 17-year-old girl. 18-year-old Marcus Fakana has been detained since September after the girl's mother reported him to Dubai police, despite her now being 18. Campaign group detained in Dubai calls the case an utter disgrace, accusing the UK government of failing to intervene. A petition demanding stronger support for Marcus has now gained over 40,000 signatures, while a fundraiser has raised £35,000, including a donation from the actor Kit Harington. The family has pleaded with the Dubai ruler to spare him, warning tourists of risks in the UAE. Those are the latest headlines for now. A full roundup at the top of the hour. Martin back next after this short break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It is sunny out there for some, but for most it's a cloudy afternoon once again, and there'll be mist and fog forming fairly widely overnight, either as a result of cloud lowering or clear skies leading to formation of fog patches. We've got high pressure centred over the UK, but for the vast majority that does mean that it's going to be, again, largely cloudy heading into the evening and overnight. Still some drizzly showers along the south coast and increasingly some drizzly rain pushing into the east and central part of England by dawn. That accompanied by a lot of low cloud and mist. Meanwhile, for parts of Scotland, under clear skies, frost and fog patches as we begin Thursday. Certainly a chilly start for much of Scotland, with temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered glens, although eastern Scotland seeing a lot of cloud move in through the night, likewise for the north and the west. So here, frost-free, but it's inland where we'll see those frost and fog patches, some fog patches continuing into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, though, mostly cloudy, and the cloud lowering significantly across the Midlands, northern and eastern England to give a misty, murky start in places. That also accompanied by drizzly rain. Mostly this rain's light, but it will be rather persistent for some eastern counties of England. So a gloomy and in places damp day to come. But bright skies hang on for parts of central Scotland at least. Here temperatures of 3 to 5 Celsius at best, further south 7 to 9 degrees. Now, overnight, the hole in the cloud across central Scotland will become increasingly small as cloud sinks southeast from the northwest and cloud further south encroaches as well. So Friday's a cloudy day. By Saturday and Sunday, it's turning wetter, but also milder.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Some big queues still for the M42 in the West Midlands on the northbound side of the carriageway. Now between Coventry at 6 and Coleshill at 7, there's a lane coned off whilst the collision dealt with the queues back to Solihull and Knoll at junction 5. An earlier van fire on the northbound M1 still causing delays between the Tibshaft services and Chesterfield at junction 29. Of course, it's in the roadworks there. Patchy queues back to junction 28 at Mansfield. Now Westminster and London Whitehall remains closed off between Trafalgar Square and Parliament Square as for a farmers' demonstration. Queues around Trafalgar Square and back to Waterloo Bridge and Hyde Park Corner and Victoria Embankment. And the southbound A12 in Essex, the exit slip coming off at Whittam South at 21, closed and queuing. There's a collapsed manhole, and that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:40 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, British intelligence services remain concerned over the potential return of jihadists to the UK following the mass release of prisoners, of course, in Syria. The Home Office are reportedly monitoring the situation with a large number of Syrian refugees in the UK now attempting to change their existing cases in order to stay in the country and avoid being deported back to their homeland. Well, I'm now joined in the studio to discuss this with our political editor, Chris Hope. Chris, let's start, if we can, on the prospect of returning jihadis. Are the government concerned, and should we be?
Both, I think, because the problem here, of course, when a country collapses in 2 weeks, like it did, the Assad regime, not the country, the Assad regime collapsed. He is now with his family in Moscow, we understand. They are concerned because there's lots of fallout from there. Dame Angela Eagle, who's the immigration minister, she says the return to the UK of British jihadists, Martin, from Syria, is a matter of great concern, in her words. She says that MI6, MI5, GCHQ are, in her words, keeping a very, very close eye on the situation on the ground. The focus of this country right now, we're watching northern Syria, where British jihadists have been held in prisons there. They could be free from jails. Where will they go next? Do they have UK passports? Maybe not. They're in prison. They may have the passports. We don't know. The UK's got a problem because we've prescribed Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS, which now runs Syria. We have no direct content. We can't with a prescribed terrorist organisation because they're past association with terrorists. They say they've moved on from that time in their history. Their leader, Abu Muhammad al-Ghani, they say they've cut the ties from the terrorist groups from the past. They've moved on. We are waiting to see. We're having a watching brief for this country.
The Taliban said they've moved on, and they also were no lying.
Well, they try to show as much, then they went back to how they used to be in terms of dealing with women, certainly, after the Americans left and the UK left. The Home Office, separate to that, has paused asylum seeker processing. Why that is, the main 5 countries who are part of this Calais Group agreement, others being France and Germany and the like, the view is that these groups, these people are taking asylum against the Assad regime, not Syria. So with Assad not in the country, why can't they go home? And that's what Chris Philp, who's the Shadow Home Secretary, he's been saying that in the House of Commons.
OK, and let's move on now to Peter. And by the way, one of those asylum seekers could be Shamima Begum. And in the past, Sir Keir Starmer said it was the wrong thing to do to not allow her
We have
back
a difference of
into
opinion,
Britain.
Martin, on this.
We do.
Some people think that we have a duty of care towards her. She was brought up here, radicalised here.
And some people would say that she sacrificed that right the moment she joined ISIS, a death cult that wanted to wipe out the Western world.
A different programme.
Yeah, I digress. That's another time. Let's get to PMQs. I've got a question for you. I listened in. You obviously did PMQs live from the studio earlier on. Why did Kemi Badenoch start today launching into Keir Starmer on immigration, a subject you can't land a glove on because 1 million people came in last year. There were 500 blooming tractors out there. The farmers were in town. Yeah. There was an easy win. Why didn't you go in on farmers?
For me, it was an error. Now, she's been in charge for 6 weeks, had a good week last week. Those 6 questions to the Prime Minister are the moment when the Tory leader can really impress her own team. Look how she's on it. I think she went on the wrong issue. There's no question the lack of an immigration mission for this government is a big weakness. They want to reduce net migration, the legal one and the illegal one, but that's all. That is a weakness for them, but the Tories can't say it because they saw net migration go up many times fold, having said through 4 elections they would cut it, reduce it, and in some cases in 2010 to tens of thousands. That was not said. I think, for me, just finally on migration, it is the Tory party's tuition fees. It is the thing they got wrong, and they broke the promises to the electorate.
Chris Hope, you're working like a dynamo all day today, and you've been at it since the dawn of time. Thank you very much. Beautiful stuff, Christopher Hope, here in the studio. Now then, moving on, because 3 family members have been found guilty of the murder of 10-year-old Sara Sharif, and GBNews' national reporter Charlie Peters has the background to this horrific case.
An innocent 10-year-old girl, her life stolen by those who should have protected her. Sara Sharif was a bubbly girl. Teachers in Woking said she was confident and full of ideas. But her smile was extinguished. Her body was found with dozens of injuries at her family home in August last year. She had been brutally killed. No one else was in the house. Her family had fled to Pakistan, seen here arriving for a flight from Heathrow. Her father left a note on her body that said, "Love you, Sara," and "I swear that my intention was not to kill her. I am running away because I am scared." Irfan Sharif made a dramatic call to police officers from Pakistan, appearing to confess to her murder.
I cannot. I physically punished my daughter and she died. I left home in a panic. God, she is allowed at home.
I need you to take a breath because I cannot understand what you're saying, okay? Your daughter has died.
I killed my daughter. I killed my daughter.
When they returned, Sharif was arrested on the tarmac alongside Benash Batul, Sara's stepmother, and Faisal Malik, her uncle. All 3 denied murder or allowing her death.
Can you tell us, please, what happened? No comment.
What's your understanding of murder? What's your understanding of that offence?
Killing someone.
What happened to Sara?
No comment.
Who is responsible for her death?
No comments. This little girl was tortured. No comments.
Jurors at the Old Bailey trial heard about the campaign of abuse inflicted on her. They learned that Sara had been hooded, burned, bitten and beaten during more than 2 years of violence. Sara started wearing a hijab. She was the only member of her family to wear a head covering. The hijab hid the injuries to her face. Forensic pathologists detailed dozens of injuries to her bones. She was beaten so badly with a cricket bat that it broke her spine. She was attacked with a white metal pole, causing multiple fractures. One expert said it was even possible that Sara had been starved in the days before her death. As the trial reached its conclusion, Irfan Sharif dramatically accepted full responsibility for her death, but denied that he had intended to kill her. Under cross-examination, Sara's father said, "She died because of me." He had previously argued that Batul was a psycho responsible for Sara's death, and that the note on her body and his phone call were made to protect his wife. His lawyer said that Sharif will be in the circles of hell for eternity. And as justice is delivered, Sara is resting, finally, in peace. Charlie Peters, GB News, the Old Bailey.
Charlie Peters, it's a heartbreaking case, joins me now. The denials, the disappearances, but finally today, Sara Sharif justice was served.
That's right, Martin. Those guilty verdicts coming in after an 8-week trial, a trial that was horrific, to be frank. It was painful for all to attend due to the details of the torture that this little girl endured. The forensic pathologists spending days running through the constellation of injuries that she had to face at the hands of those who should have loved for her and cared for her. And the reaction to this guilty verdict has been severe. We've heard from the Children's Commissioner saying that this verdict has a profound impact, and also it's a time for authorities to immediately reflect on potential failings in this case. There will be an inquest to urgently look at possibilities that were missed by the authorities to intervene in this case. She was referred to social services on numerous occasions. Neighbours were aware of something being awfully wrong in that house. Her school teachers were aware of her turning up with injuries, and she was removed from school. And just briefly, I'd like to bring a tribute from Sara Sharif's mother. Released after those verdicts today, she said that Sara was a beautiful girl with an angelic voice and beautiful brown eyes. She says, "God, please take care of my little girl. She was taken too soon."
Thank you, Charlie Peters. Very moving. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The BBC has been branded jaw-achingly stupid, not by me, by the way, over its decision to cast black and ethnic minority actors in the historical drama of Wolf Hall. Now, is this a forward-thinking idea or nonsense? And are we rewriting history? Henry, I mean, the Tudors were real-life people. They were pretty much white.
Well, some of these shows depart so much from historical context anyway that maybe it doesn't make any difference. But I think just generally we've got a problem in this country with portraying history in its correct sense. You can't change history. And I think it's about the motivation. If the motivation is to sort of to some sort of, you know, to make a political point, then I think it's wrong.
What I find kind of tedious about people finding this instant jaw-droppingly stupid, Jesus was portrayed by somebody who's half Slovak and half Irish. Moses was portrayed in the Exodus by an Englishman. So, you know, same with Anne Boleyn, you know, was portrayed by Natalie Portman, who was Jewish. So if this is the one thing that's getting people angry, then there's something deeper within that rage, because I think Hollywood's been doing that, where people...
When you say something deeper, do you think there is a hidden racism and people are complaining about this?
Well, I think for some, maybe yes. I can't speak for everybody because this news dropped today. I don't know why they are thinking that it's egregious, but there absolutely must be some underlying racism if this is the only one that you're upset about.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 3:53 with me, Martin Daubney. Now then, it's Christmas. So what does that mean? It means Christmas pudding. It means too much to eat. It also means train strikes. Yes, they're back. Despite the fact £500 million was given to train drivers, 60 grand a year they're on for a 3-day week. Guess what? Mick the Grinch Lynch is back. There are train strikes this Christmas. Happy Christmas from the unions. December the 22nd, December the 23rd and December the 29th. Key dates on the Avanti West Coast lines means you won't be able to travel around on the Sunday, the Monday and the following Sunday back from Christmas for New Year. What on earth is going on? Wasn't that £500 million meant to be about making sure that these things were put to bed? And guess what? The strikes are back. Mick the Grinch Lynch once again trying to steal Christmas. Just when you thought it was safe to go back, Mick Lynch has hoved into view. It's an astonishing situation. How can it happen? Guess what? It's about rest days. They're not happy with their rest days. Now, when we get back, it's more about farmers as rural community continues its fight against the inheritance tax. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, here's your weather.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It is sunny out there for some, but for most it's a cloudy afternoon once again, and there'll be mist and fog forming fairly widely overnight, either as a result of cloud lowering or clear skies leading to formation of fog patches. We've got high pressure centred over the UK, but for the vast majority that does mean that it's going to be, again, largely cloudy heading into the evening and overnight. Still some drizzly showers along the south coast and increasingly some drizzly rain pushing into the east and central part of England by dawn. That accompanied by a lot of low cloud and mist. Meanwhile, for parts of Scotland, under clear skies, frost and fog patches as we begin Thursday. Certainly a chilly start for much of Scotland with temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered glens, although eastern Scotland seeing a lot of cloud move in through the night, likewise for the north and the west. So here frost free, but it's inland where we'll see those frost and fog patches, some fog patches continuing into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, England and Wales though mostly cloudy, and the cloud lowering significantly across the Midlands, northern and eastern England to give a misty, murky start in places. That also accompanied by drizzly rain. Mostly this rain's light, but it will be rather persistent for some eastern counties of England. So a gloomy and in places damp day to come. But bright skies hang on for parts of central Scotland at least. Here temperatures of 3 to 5 Celsius at best, further south 7 to 9 degrees. Now, overnight, the hole in the cloud across central Scotland will become increasingly small as cloud sinks southeast from the northwest and cloud further south encroaches as well. So Friday's a cloudy day. By Saturday and Sunday, it's turning wetter, but also milder.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon again. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. There's some queues in the West Midlands on both sides of the M6. So firstly then, on the southbound side, Great Bar at 7 towards Spaghetti Junction at 6. Now, 2 lanes are combed off. It's because of a collision, so that's queuing on the northbound side. So 6 up towards Junction 7, a lane shut as well. That's from Daybury from the collision on the opposite side of the carriageway. So the M6 slow both ways between 6 and 7 this afternoon. Between Ashmansworth and Hollington Cross in Hampshire, Red Hill, that's the A343, is closed both ways. There's a fallen tree causing delays, and very slow in Westminster. Whitehall remains closed between Horseguards Avenue and Parliament Square. There's a demonstration ongoing. Seeing queues to both sides of Victoria Embankment at Trafalgar Square back towards Waterloo Bridge and Hyde Park Corner.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's our festive treat to you. Your chance to win an incredible £50,000 in tax-free cash. Our biggest ever Great British giveaway. What would you spend £50,000 on in the coming year? Spectacular holidays, a brand new car, home improvements, or maybe you'd just like to save it for a special occasion. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. On today's show, farmers have descended on Westminster, 500 tractors indeed, to continue their fight against the government's changes to inheritance tax. Will the small farmers be heard, or will their cries for change fall on deaf ears? And with the Assad regime in Syria toppled, the UK government is now concerned that new Islamic terrorist groups could now rise out of its ashes. We'll have the latest on the developments as the fighting continues, and maybe the jihadis are coming towards the UK. And spending on policing immigration has skyrocketed since 2019 as the latest figures exclusively seen by GB News reveals that the total cost has increased by an astonishing 833%. Should this money be allocated elsewhere, or does the problem merit the cost? And guess what? The total budget, 1.2 trillion quid. And Mick the Grinch, Chris Lynch, has struck once again. Well, it is Christmas, as train strikes once again threaten thousands of families reuniting for Christmas. Avanti West are the latest company to introduce a reduced timetable for the 22nd, the 23rd and the 29th of December. They're doing it again. Who is really to blame? We'll have all the answers in the next hour. Welcome to the show. So I'm joined in the studio right now by two of the farmers from the protest, Andrew and Martin. I'll be talking to them shortly about what they think this is achieving. Will the government listen, or will they still plough the same old furrow? Is there room to negotiate a settlement where everybody will be satisfied, or are we simply at loggerheads? And talking of which, I was out there earlier on. I've just about got my hearing back. It was deafening. The farmers are blasting out their klaxons and their horns. For now, at least, the mood was one of a carnival, of a party, but will that mood endure? Or will the mood sour as the government refuses to listen? Could the protests become slightly more militant next time? These two lads know the answer, and they're going to tell me shortly. Get in touch with your thoughts, gbnews.com/your say. But first is your headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you very much. It's just gone 4 o'clock. The top story this hour. After years of what prosecutors called horrific abuse, 3 members of Sara Sharif's family have been found guilty today over her death. Her father, Sara Sharif, and her stepmother, Baynash Batul, were convicted of murder, while her uncle, Faisal Malik, was found guilty of allowing her death. The The 10-year-old suffered unimaginable violence at her home in Woking before her body was found last August. The convictions have sparked calls for urgent reform in child protection, with the Children's Commissioner warning of profound weaknesses in the system. Sentencing has been set for next Tuesday. Well, the Detective Chief Inspector Craig Emerson says the case has shocked and horrified people not just here in the UK but across the world.
Sara's young life was brought to an end as a result of the brutal abuse and unspeakable violence inflicted on her by Sharif, Batul, which Malik did nothing to prevent.
In other news, thousands of farmers have been driving their tractors through Westminster today, demanding action from the government to rethink plans of imposing a 20% tax on farms worth over £1 million. Chancellor Rachel Reeves insists most farmers won't be affected, but critics say the changes threaten livelihoods, heritage and food security. Earlier, protesters held a minute's silence for farmers who've been lost to stress and financial pressures. Calls for a pause and consultation from the government are growing louder, but Downing Street says the policy isn't going to change.
This is the death of farming that's going to happen under this government. So we want to mark that, but once we get to Parliament, you give them what for. We're here to make a noise. This is a war we will win, and the government will do a U-turn. That is determined by all of us to push that.
Meanwhile, inside the Commons this afternoon, Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch clashed over immigration at Prime Minister's questions. The opposition leader criticised Sir Keir Starmer's record on immigration, claiming he'd consistently backed criminals entering the UK.
The Prime Minister signed a letter demanding that foreign criminals be allowed to stay in Britain. Dozens of Labour and Liberal Democrat MPs repeatedly signed these letters, insisting that rapists and murderers be allowed to stay here. Will he apologise for signing these letters?
But the Prime Minister hit back, accusing the Conservatives of losing control of the borders.
I'm glad she now wants to talk about immigration. Last week she said she didn't, and for good reason, because the previous government presided over record high levels of immigration. The figures just a few weeks ago, nearly 1 million on net migration. That is unprecedented. A one-nation experiment in open borders under the last government. And she was the champion. She stood up and praised the then Tory Home Secretary for listening to her on removing caps on migration visas. So she was applauding it. Now she's furious about what she was campaigning for. We will drive it down. We will drive down lawful migration. We'll drive down illegal migration.
In other news, a ban on puberty blockers for under 18s in the UK is now indefinite. That's after experts found their use posed an unacceptable safety risk. The Commission on Human Medicines recommended the restrictions remain in place until further evidence ensures that the drug's safe for children with gender dysphoria. Baroness Cass, who led a review into children's gender care, has welcomed the move, describing the drugs as powerful with unproven benefits and significant risks. Support is now being offered to families affected, while the NHS says it plans to open 8 new gender identity clinics by 2026. A British teenager jailed in Dubai is appealing a 1-year sentence for having a relationship with a 17-year-old girl there. 18-year-old Marcus Fakana has been detained since September after the girl's mother reported him to police, despite the girl now being 18. Campaign group Detained in Dubai calls the case an utter disgrace, accusing the government of failing to intervene. Well, we have just heard from the Foreign Office, a spokesman saying that they are supporting a British man in the UAE and are currently in contact with the family. That comes as a petition demanding stronger support for Marcus has now gained over 40,000 signatures. And before I hand you back to Martin in Westminster, some breaking sports news for you. Saudi Arabia has been confirmed as the host of the World Cup in 2034, confirmed by FIFA. In the last few minutes, the Middle Eastern nation was the sole bidder for the tournament in 2034, winning much support despite widespread controversy. At the same time, FIFA also finalised plans for the 2030 World Cup, which will span 6 nations across 3 different continents. Meanwhile, the US, Canada and Mexico are set to co-host in 2026, and England's FA has backed both the 2030 and the 2034 plans. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you in half an hour. Now, though, it's back to Martin.
Thank you, Sam. Now, furious farmers descended on Westminster earlier on today to continue their protests against the government's changes to the inheritance tax rules. And this is the latest in a number of UK-wide rallies over the last few weeks, with an estimated 20,000 farmers arriving in central London, of course, over the past month. And one farmer made it very clear of what he thought about the government's attitude towards British agriculture.
This is the death of farming that's going to happen under this government. So we want to mark that. But once we get to Parliament, you give them what for. We're here to make a noise. This is a war we will win, and the government will do a U-turn. That is determined by all of us to push that.
And of course, there is Matt Cullen and Liz Webster in the background, the organisers of today's event, and they've been in this studio. But are they getting their message across? Well, join me in the studio are two of the farmers who were at that protest earlier on today, Martin Williams and Andrew Ward. Gentlemen, welcome to GB News. Andrew, let's start with you. So I was at the protest earlier on. It seemed quite joyous in its mood, a carnival atmosphere, the farmers blasting their horns away, tinsel around their cabins. For now, the mood is pleasant, but it is an escalation. Last time, 20,000 farmers on foot. This time, the heavy machinery rolls in. But they didn't have any slurry spreaders attached on the back. They didn't have any barrels of you-know-what attached on the back either. For now, the mood is good. How long will that mood last if the government doesn't listen?
I think it just shows the nature of the industry, because we've got these massive clouds hanging over us. But as you've just said, the atmosphere out there was really one of pleasantness, of niceness, of people enjoying themselves, despite this massive cloud hanging over us. And there's no denying that this is only the start. We are playing nicely at the moment in the playground in those terms, and we will just keep going. But at the moment, we've got Christmas coming up. We've got the public on side massively at the moment. We don't want to disrupt that. But after Christmas, if the government don't listen and start talking to us, then it will be stepped up.
But the government's saying that they're already listening to you. Today, they've made an announcement that they're injecting 343 million quid into the rural economy in the first week of December. More than 31,000 farmers they claim will benefit, and that's a boost of 5 billion quid to the farming budget. What are you moaning about?
It's all very well them saying what they give us. They're not telling us what they're taking away. And next year, they're removing 78% of the D-Link payments that were due to come to us. And that is a huge amount of money that ultimately goes into the countryside, that when you start to look at wildlife, nature and those sorts of things that we have to do and we want to do to protect at the same time as producing food, the first things we start to pull back on are those sort of things rather than growing the crops. And indirectly, they are affecting the countryside and wildlife and its very existence.
Martin Williams, let's bring you in now. Do you think they're going to listen to them? I mean, they couldn't ignore the noise. They'd be able to hear it. You can hear it down here. We're 2 floors underground. You can't get away from the noise, but will they listen to the message?
I think that it's difficult for them not to listen to the message. The public, as Andrew said, are on our side now. I think they will be on our side because they can see the value in our argument. We can also see the mistakes that they've made in their budgeting numbers, which are, quite frankly, embarrassing. If you come out with the wrong numbers, you're going to get the wrong answer, aren't you? And unfortunately, they definitely have got the wrong answer at the moment. As for their injection of cash, oh my goodness, we've done the work for that cash at the moment. That's a part of a contract to do nature-friendly farming as part of the SFI. That is a contracted amount of money. It is nothing new. It's just an absolute smokescreen.
Do you think, the question is to both you gentlemen, a lot of people that find themselves as new leaders of this movement, Matt Cullen, Liz Webster, Clive Bailey, Ollie Harrison is coming in at 5 o'clock. They've come from nowhere to become standard bearers, what feels like a more, I wouldn't say militant, but a more proactive movement of farmers. Is that needed in Britain? Is there a feeling that the National Farmers Union is sort of playing too cosy with government? Are we ready to get a bit more militant in Britain, as we've seen happen in France and across the continent?
It's very difficult when you're trying to get a message across to government, and the NFU's position is that they're a lobby organisation. What's going on in Whitehall and has gone on in Whitehall is possibly beyond lobbying. So, in their defence, they are in behind the scenes lobbying their MPs and lobbying MPs in Parliament. So, they have a job to do, whether we are the SAS of the farming industry, where we can go out and be a bit more nimble and a bit more militant, then maybe that's the case.
Andrew, is lobbying working, or do you start lobbying stuff. Without inciting anything. You get what I'm saying?
I do.
The French played pleasant, and they don't often do that. The French are good at protesting, and they're effective. We've just seen the train drivers are on strike again. They were given half £1 billion, and they're going to go on strike again. So is a strike or something like that the next potential route open to you?
A train driver sits on his backside to earn £70,000 a year. Now, most farms will be absolutely delighted to receive that amount in the pay. But I think going the next level, we have to do that, and we will join up with the other groups. There's lots of these splinter groups popping up all over the country, which is fine. People who couldn't come to London today. There's a big one in York at the moment today as well, and there's these dotted around the countryside. And eventually we will join together to do the big one, and that's where we will have to do it, and we will do if the government don't come to us. We're not asking for it to completely get rid of everything and go back on everything. There is a halfway house that will protect the true family farm, that will protect businesses. It's not just farmers, it's businesses that are affected by this budget.
And don't you both agree, gentlemen, Martin, that there could be a healthy compromise here? Everybody agrees, don't they, that if you're gaming the system, if you're buying a load of land to dodge taxes, if you've got a few chickens on it, but really you're not a farmer, then everybody agrees that they should get fingered. But why get everybody in the dragnet?
Exactly. They've hit the target that they specifically say they didn't want to hit. And if you hit the target and you retract and you say, actually, yeah, sorry, we got that a bit wrong, everyone would understand that. But to carry on with this rhetoric around this is what we're going to do and blindly going on actually is nonsense.
Gentlemen, can I very quickly show you a clip of Sir Keir Starmer? He addressed the NFU conference before the general election.
Every day seems to bring a new existential risk to British farming. Losing a farm is not like losing any other business. It can't come back.
Well, Andrew, he sounds exactly like you. A farm isn't another business. It can't come back.
He looks so po-faced there, doesn't he, when he's saying that? And every time I see him, it just grates my gears because he just clearly cannot tell the truth. And when you question them about what they said before the election, oh, well, the goalposts have moved, circumstances have changed, they didn't realise the country was in such a bad way as it was. Absolute rubbish. He's no intention of telling the truth. And when you come forward into the future, is he ever going to tell the truth?
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave it there. We've simply run out of time, but stick around. I'll try and have a beer with you after the show. Andrew Ward, Martin Williams, pleasure to have you in the studio here at GB News. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, Christmas reunions are once again under threat, with Avanti West Coast announcing another train strike for 3 massively impactful days over the festive period. Walkouts have been scheduled, wait for it, for the 22nd, the 23rd and the 29th of December for all Avanti services after staff rejected the company's proposals for rest day working arrangements. Around 300 train managers are expected to join the walkout. I cannot believe it, but joining me now is GB News Scotland reporter Tony Maguire, who is outside Holyrood. Tony Maguire, welcome to the show. It's Christmas, and it wouldn't be Christmas without Mick the Grinch Lynch trying to steal Christmas from us.
Yeah, good afternoon, Martin. I was actually just thinking that, you know, when I was growing up, Christmas was all about carolling and opening little doors with little chocolates behind it. But now it's pretty much all about train strikes for lots of people who are really hoping to get home either up north or down south for the holidays. Those 3 days that you mentioned there, the 22nd, a Sunday, the 23rd, a Monday, and of course the 29th, which is the following Sunday. 3 highly impactful days which would allow people to get up and down around the Christmas break. Well, those 300 train managers, you know, these are the conductors essentially that walk up and down the train and, you know, give you a fine or tap you on the shoulder when you've stayed on that extra stop. But certainly 300 of them, I think around 90% of the membership, well, they took part in the ballot, and a staggering number of them, almost 100%, actually voted to go ahead with this strike action. Now, RMT, as you said, run by Mick Lynch, essentially, well, he had said that train managers are being treated unfairly compared to the senior managers who receive significant payments, but he remains hopeful that a renegotiated deal can be struck. Now, Avanti West Coast, they were awarded that contract last year, and then certainly in March of this year, well, it turned out out that for extra days, that train drivers, well, they would get up to £600 for that extra shift day. So we don't quite know the figure that's been attached to the rejected deal, but certainly it looks like they are, of course, trying to get more money out of this. And this just months after RMT agreed various train companies to offer more money to their drivers. So as we have one block of strikes avoided, or 2 years since 2022, that train driver disruption was a part of a lot of commuters' everyday lives. Well, here we go. As Christmas comes, it looks like we've got another one just down the pipeline.
Astonishing stuff there. Tony Maguire from Glasgow. Christmas is coming, so is the strike. £500 million we spent on train drivers to try and make this go away. The two farmers are still with me. They're furious at this rate. I'll be hopping on one of their tractors to get home to Nottingham at Christmas. Now, up next, I delve into why the cost of policing immigration in the UK has simply exploded over the past 5 years. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Joined by international life coach Cheryl Findlay, who has joined forces with a Liverpool business owner, Kate Hill, of sustainable sportswear brand Lola Star, to empower women and inspire women across the nation. And to celebrate this partnership with the new Lola Star collection, the two will be hosting an exclusive event next Saturday.
The sportswear brand was launched after, well, your story. You lost how much weight?
So 16 stone, which is over £220, which
wow.
I know is quite significant. But during that kind of decade-long journey, I learned a lot about myself. And I learned a lot about what it takes to be successful, to be happy, to be well, and to just live an incredible life every day.
Are you giving them goals to work towards or helping them structure their life?
Yeah, so I don't give out goals, absolutely not. It's all about whatever an individual wants. So what we do to begin with is we understand, like, where are you now? Where are you thriving? Where do you feel really happy and excited in your life? And what's lacking? Like, where would you like to feel better? Where would you like to improve? And then we take it from there.
So I'd love to take that on board. I'd love to be my true self and fulfil my potential. So have you got any practical tips on how to do that?
Yeah, so we start with clarity, right? Like, you need to know, it's such a busy, fast-paced world we live in. There's so much sensory overload. You know, it'd be so easy to be distracted. So we need to kind of quiet all that noise down and start with, where do I want to focus? Pick 2 or 3 things. Where do I want to focus? And then we define the goal. What would I like that area of my life to look, not just look like, but feel like? And then we take it from there. So that's where you would start. I actually had a cancer diagnosis in 2019.
Oh.
And I just decided if I was going to be lucky enough to be on the other side of it, I wasn't going to play small anymore.
GB News, the people's...
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:22 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, fears have grown about public spending after GB News has been shown exclusive figures about the simply skyrocketing costs of policing immigration over the past 5 years. Estimates have currently been saying that the costs have increased by over 800% since 2019. So could the £22 billion black hole in our public services be explained by the simply eye-watering expenditure associated with with immigration. Well, I'm now joined in the studio to get to the bottom of this by the Communications Director at the Campaign for an Independent Britain, Ben Phillips. Ben, welcome to the studio. It's an astonishing report. Thank you very much for sharing it with us. Let's start with the top line figure. The total cost of public expenditure is £1.2 trillion. I mean, that's a number that most people cannot even comprehend.
Yeah, it is simply off the scale, and we cannot carry on as we are. I mean, it is simply mind-blowing, and the days of never, never are simply coming to an end. Yeah. So, you know, we've simply got to try and bring this information to the attention of the public as quickly and as urgently as we possibly can.
Good. And we've got two charts to get to show you now, which exemplify the figures. Let's get the first one up. Yep. This shows us the percentage increase, does it not, in the different sectors. Talk us through what they are so people can see that. They can't read that on their screens.
OK, well, the overall story, we have two charts illustrating the top 20 fastest rising areas of public expenditure over the past 5 years. So this one, the first chart measures the percentage increase in public expenditure over the past 5 years. Over the past 5 years. And so here you've got policing, immigration and citizenship at 832%.
That's astonishing.
It's a ninefold increase.
You can see on that chart there, it simply dwarfs everything else, and that's money being spent on immigration.
It is. I mean, and we shouldn't be surprised about that. You think of the public protests that have taken place over the last 12 months. You think of the civil disturbances that have taken place, the Palestinian processes, Just Stop Oil. All of this goes into the pot and would explain this huge rise.
Astonishing. And next up, we have fuel and energy.
Again, not surprising, is it? The successive governments have been caught with their pants down so far as energy is concerned. We haven't produced sustainable, cheap energy over a very, very long period of time. We're having to import it at a premium, and that, again, is being fed into the data.
Incredible stuff. And the third one down, again, will raise eyebrows here. Foreign military aid, an increase of 429%. What on earth is going on there?
Yes, well, is it going to Ukraine possibly to help the European Union to defend its borders? Again, these are the consequences of policy failures going back a very, very long time.
So we're spending a huge amount of money, 800%, 900% more on policing immigration, and then 400% on fuel and energy, and 429% on foreign military aid. Let's get the second chart up now, because the second chart actually shows us the amount of money in absolute terms that we're spending on each of the various sectors. That's on our screens there now. Talk us through these eye-watering numbers from the top in the billions of pounds over the last 5 years. What's the top of the pops?
Well, there we go. We've got medical services, which is Treasury speak for the health service,
NHS.
Effectively. That's right, the NHS. So that's a £54.8 billion increase to the year 23-24.
Yep. Second up is...
And the second up is Bank of England debt transactions. Well, again, this, we think, and again, it's obfuscated through Treasury speak, but we think it's basically the mismanagement of QE by the Bank of England during COVID lockdown.
So that's basically the money that we gave away, money we printed, and the debt we incurred, therefore the debt we are now servicing.
That's right.
That's the second biggest expenditure in the entire public sector.
It is. They're buying bonds at a premium and then selling them at a loss.
And that's £35 billion a year. Astonishing. And the third one there on that list is
central government debt interest, which is basically the escalating debt that the government is accumulating over this period. And the full mind-blowing figure, Martin, is £121 billion worth of debt, which we've also got figures on, which if we break that down. So we've got central government debt interest at £78.2 billion and Bank of England debt at close on £24 billion. So that's £121 billion that's going out the back door, for which we have no discernible benefit at all.
And something that leaps out here, Ben, the next on the list is pensions. This is public sector pensions. So these are those golden handcuff pensions, the kind of pensions that, by the way, won't be impacted by Rachel Reeves' cuts. These are the ones you're guaranteed in the public sector. A simply astonishing £28.2 billion in public sector pensions. Every penny of that paid for by taxpayers.
Yes, by the taxpayers, and the increasingly burdened private sector. and small and medium-sized businesses who are up to their necks in it already, having to work even harder to produce the revenues.
And then next on this list, and it really is worth dwelling on the detail because it simply is mind-blowing, we have social exclusion expenditure.
Yes.
What's that?
Social exclusion.
Is that prisons?
Well, social exclusion, again, it's a vague term that the Treasury use. We basically believe that it's housing and other ancillary benefits for incoming migrants who are coming into the country.
Incredible. And we're spending, and then below that, we're spending £13.5 billion on incapacity, disability and injury benefits. All of this is bigger than defence. We're spending more on sickness benefits than we spend on defence at £11 billion. And public sector pensions is twice what we spend on the defence of the realm. It's astonishing. We're spending twice the amount on pensions that we are on the MOD.
We are paying to be sick and we're getting weaker in the process.
It's an eye-watering report, but thank you for sharing it for us, and thanks for coming in.
My pleasure.
Because these are the sort of figures we simply have to shine the light on. Thank you very much, Ben Phillips, the Deputy Chair of the Campaign for an Independent Britain, for joining us in the studio. Fabulous. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now, moving on, because during Advent, as we count down to Christmas Day, we are hearing from church ministers across the country, and each day they have a special message for you to help celebrate the festive season. Here's today's.
The GB News Advent Calendar, Day 11.
Hi, I'm Chris Tufnell. I'm the vicar of Uterbridge Parish Church near Sheffield. Do you know the story of the Christmas Day Truce 1914? It's very well known. British and German soldiers of the First World War climbed out of their trenches and began to exchange gifts of chocolates and cigarettes, even playing a game of football. It's well known, and rightly so, because what a beautiful thing it is for peace to be brought into a place of conflict and war. Of course, that was supposed to be the war to end all wars. That's what they called it, but we all know it wasn't. Human history is littered with conflict. And conflict isn't just something that happens between nations, it happens between colleagues, neighbours, friends and family members. It can even happen within us. At Christmas, we remember that Jesus came into the world to bring peace. Peace between humans, but also peace between humanity and God. In a sense, the birth of Jesus was the original Christmas Day truce. The invitation is for us to climb out of our trenches and enjoy with him the peace he offers. Happy Christmas.
Wonderful stuff. Absolutely love those messages. And you can see all of our special messages of Advent as Christmas approaches by going to gbnews.com/Advent. And a very, very Merry Christmas to you. Now, there's loads more still to come between now and 5 o'clock, including the latest on potential terrorists being released from Syrian prisons following, of course, the collapse of the Assad regime. Could Shamima Begum be on her way home? But first, here's your latest headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Very good afternoon to you. It is 4:31 exactly. Well, after years of what prosecutors have called horrific abuse, 3 members of Sara Sharif's family have today been found guilty over her death. Her father, Irfan Sharif, and stepmother, Bainash Batul, were convicted of murder, while her uncle, Faisal Malik, was found guilty of allowing her death. The 10-year-old suffered unimaginable violence at her home in Woking before her body was found last August. The convictions have sparked calls for urgent reform in child protection, with the Children's Commissioner warning of profound weaknesses in the system. Sentencing has been set for next Tuesday. Well, earlier, speaking outside the court in London, Detective Chief Inspector Craig Emerson says the case has shocked and horrified people around the world.
Sara's young life was brought to an end as a result of the brutal abuse and unspeakable violence inflicted on her by Sharif, Batul, which Malik did nothing to prevent.
In other news, thousands of farmers have been driving their tractors into Westminster today, demanding the government rethinks plans to impose a 20% inheritance tax on farms and land worth over £1 million. Chancellor Rachel Reeves insists most farms won't be affected, but critics say the changes threaten livelihoods and food security. Earlier, protesters held a minute's silence in Westminster for farmers who have been lost to stress and financial pressures. Calls for a pause and consultation are now growing louder, but Downing Street says the policy won't be changing.
This is the death of farming that's going to happen under this government. So we want to mark that, but once we get to Parliament, you give them what for. We're here to make a noise. This is a war we will win, and the government will do a U-turn. That is determined by all of us to push that.
Saudi Arabia will be hosting the 2034 World Cup, confirmed by FIFA earlier today. The Middle Eastern nation was the sole bidder for that tournament, winning support despite widespread controversy. At the same time, FIFA have also finalised plans for the 2030 World Cup, which is set to span 6 nations across 3 different continents, marking 100 years of the World Cup. Meanwhile, US, Canada and Mexico are set to co-host in 2026, kicking off this historic trio of tournaments. England's FA has also backed both of those plans. And before we hand you back to Martin in Westminster, just a piece of breaking news coming to us from the Metropolitan Police. We're hearing that the officers there are investigating, they say, dozens of individuals at the post office and Fujitsu, following the wrongful prosecution of hundreds of sub-postmasters between 1999 and 2015. Currently, we understand a team of 100 officers are currently reviewing 1.5 million documents related to that scandal as they consider charges, including perjury and perverting the course of justice. So far, just 3 people have been questioned by the Met Police, with plans, they say, to interview many more in 2025. So that news just coming into us, the Met Police investigating dozens involved in the post office scandal. Those are the latest headlines for now. Martin will be back with you very shortly after this break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It is sunny out there for some, but for most it's a cloudy afternoon once again. And there'll be mist and fog forming fairly widely overnight, either as a result of cloud lowering or clear skies leading to formation of fog patches. We've got high pressure centred over the UK, but for the vast majority that does mean that it's going to be, again, largely cloudy heading into the evening and overnight. Still some drizzly showers along the south coast and increasingly some drizzly rain pushing into the east and central part of England by dawn. That accompanied by a lot of low cloud and mist. Meanwhile, for parts of Scotland, under clear skies, frost and fog patches as we begin Thursday. Certainly a chilly start for much of Scotland, with temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered glens, although eastern Scotland seeing a lot of cloud move in through the night, likewise for the north and the west. So here, frost-free, but it's inland where we'll see those frost and fog patches, some fog patches continuing into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, though, mostly cloudy, and the cloud lowering significantly across the Midlands, northern and eastern England, to give a misty, murky start in places. That also accompanied by drizzly rain. Mostly this rain's light, but it will be rather persistent for some eastern counties of England. So a gloomy and in places damp day to come. But bright skies hang on for parts of central Scotland at least. Here temperatures of 3 to 5 Celsius at best, further south 7 to 9 degrees. Now, overnight, the hole in the cloud across central Scotland will become increasingly small as cloud sinks southeast from the northwest and cloud further south encroaches as well. So Friday's a cloudy day. By Saturday and Sunday, it's turning wetter, but also milder.
The latest GB News travel.
I'm Jules Buckley. Good afternoon. There's some queues in the West Midlands, both sides of the M6 at the moment. Now, southbound, 2 lanes combed off, junction 7 to 6, so that's Great Bar down towards Spaghetti Junction. There's been a collision there. That means a queue to northbound, a lane shut, 6 up to 7. That queue northbound's back to just after a junction 5 at Castle Bromwich. Between Ashmansworth and Hollington Cross in Hampshire, the A343 Red Hill, you still can't get through. It's closed by a fallen tree. Whitehall in Westminster remains closed off between Horseguards Avenue and Parliament Square for an ongoing demonstration. Queues to both sides on the Victoria Embankment, Trafalgar Square back to Waterloo Bridge and Hyde Park Corner struggling. And the anti-clock M25 queuing before the Dartford tunnels. Not helped by an earlier collision there, but all the lanes now back open. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:37 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, British intelligence services remain concerned over the potential return of jihadists to the UK, following, of course, the mass release of prisoners in Syria. And the Home Office are reportedly monitoring the situation with a large number of Syrian refugees in the United Kingdom now attempting to change their existing cases in order to stay in the country and avoid being sent back to their homeland. Loads to discuss, and in the studio with me to discuss that now is our political editor, the superb Chris Hope. Chris, so rightly, thoughts are concerned about the jihadists leaving Syria. They could be on their way to the United Kingdom. One of them could be Shamima Begum. Should we be concerned?
Well, the government is. I think we should be concerned. Yes, if they're concerned, we're concerned. Dame Angela Eagle, she's the immigration minister. She says that the return to the UK of British jihadists from Syria is, quote, a matter of great concern. She says MI5, MI6, GCHQ, the security services, are, in quotes, keeping a very, very close eye on the situation on the ground. There are concerns about northern Syria. That's where British jihadis are being held or have been held in jails. They could be freed by this new group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, HTS. They are in control now of Syria after Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow. We have no direct contact with HTS, the group, because they are a prescribed terror group, even though they've moved away from their terror roots in the past few years, past decade or so. So we can't really talk to them. We can go through proxy third countries, maybe Turkey. We can't talk directly. So there is worries, and we've got all our spook energy aimed at that part of Syria at the moment. Meanwhile, here in this country, the Home Office has paused asylum-seeking processing. The reason why that is, you are seeking asylum if you're Syrian because you're against the Bashar al-Assad regime. Now he's gone, why can't you go back to Syria? A question which Chris Philp, the Home Secretary, put to the government today. The Home Office say they're monitoring it in place and need a deterrent to lower migrant numbers. So they are concerned about it, but it's a concern, I think, for this government. So that's all the background, and maybe that's why we saw Tory leader Kemi Badenoch ask about immigration at PMQs.
I thought that was a total mistake. I've got to be honest with you.
It felt jarring, Martin.
Well, the situation is this, right? There are 500 blooming tractors outside.
You were outside with them.
I was outside. You were holding PMQs live at GB News. When Kemi Badenoch stood up, I thought, she's going to go on farming. Yep. She's going to say, I got your back. You know, you're destroying the farming community, Keir Starmer. They're outside. They won't take no for an answer. And what are you going to do about it? And instead, she went in on immigration. And, of course, all Keir Starmer has to do is say, well, you failed. He keeps saying it was an open borders experiment. 4 times you promised. 4 times you didn't deliver. 14 years of failure. An open borders experiment. 1 million came in on your watch. Sit down. And I just felt that she didn't go in on the subject of the day.
She has 6 questions a week. That's Prime Minister's questions. 6 questions on anything in the world to ask the Prime Minister. She chose the issue, which, yes, is a weakness for the Labour government, because it's not in one of their 6 missions, as we saw last Thursday, in Pinewood Studios. We had the unveiling by Keir Starmer. Nothing on migration. It's a foundational idea to reduce it, both net and illegal migration. But that's it. Now, I've gone to... and also, you correctly say we had a split screen on GB News' channel all day with the protesters. You had the NFU President Tom Bradshaw in near tears in Parliament. Tractors outside at the gates of Parliament. Why not do it? I've gone to her team and they say this, that Kemi Badenoch has repeatedly raised the issue of the family farm tax in PMQs on our Opposition Day debates. We covered that at length at GB News.
But today was the day they were outside in their they're an army of farmers.
But they say that she conceded the question on the mistakes in immigration 2 weeks ago, but they're not afraid to go after tough issues. They feel they've said sorry, or mistakes were made, I should say, in that speech from Kemi Badenoch last week or 2 weeks ago, and that's why that gives them the free hit on the Labour government. I've got to say, Keir Starmer looks very relaxed, because all he can say is, well, your government saw it go up to nearly 1 million in a year, 1 million in a year on your watch. What can you say?
And that's a problem,
The
I think.
smiling Cheshire cat, who is that? Nigel Farage.
Yeah.
He sees the two big parties rowing about record on migration, both apparently failing, although we haven't yet to see the Labour government. They may well succeed in reducing it, although quite a limited target to reduce it, rather than go to after a lower target. They may succeed, but the person grinning away, who hasn't yet been in government, is Nigel Farage, because being in government, this is the hardest thing to do, controlling migration, because the challenges we have with getting people back to work in this country, the reliance on foreign labour is a big challenge. Hasn't been tested on Farage, but the two parties, well, so far on illegal migration, Labour's failing, and on both measures, I would say Tories failed.
And with £4 million and counting in his back pocket, there's probably no wonder he's got a bit of a smile on his chops today.
Maybe more coming that way, as you well know.
Maybe with Musk's millions. Chris Hope, always a pleasure, never a chore. Thank you very much for joining us in the studio. Excellent. Now, coming up, I will meet the inspiring, a sensational story. It's Slimming World's Woman of the Year, and find out how to avoid overindulging during the festive period. It really is an astonishing story. This woman lost half her body weight. What's the secret? We'll find out next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Following the summer riots and the resurgence of far-right ideologies, the former Education Secretary told peers that reinforcing shared values is now more crucial than ever.
So we're asking this morning, should we teach British values or would it be a step backward?
Or how do you even start? To debate this now, we're joined by the Campaign for Real Education chairman, Chris McGovern, and political commentator Matthew Stadland.
Well, I think these days, particularly in schools, it's quite fashionable to look at the negative sides of Britain's identity, particularly British history. Personally, I think I'm very proud of being British, and I think we need to be proud of our country like most other countries around the world are.
As Chris says, Matthew, lots of other countries do it. Heck, you only have to look at the United States, don't you, to see how sort of patriotic they are. Is there anything wrong in trying to instil a bit of that amongst our youth?
I'm just worried it sounds a little bit communist, Stephen, being told what it is to be British. I've got my own personal but very vague views of what British values might be: inclusivity, patience, being able to queue, decency, respect for democracy and the rule of law. But I mean, very many people will have different sets of values. Some people are racist. So are British values racist? You talked about the far right. I think we all know what the far right is. It's sort of violent, xenophobic racism. But if you have, say, I don't know, 3-4 million people in this country who might describe themselves as racist or far right, and they're British, or as British as you lot and as I am, does that mean those values get taught in schools? My worry is it's a little bit communist.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:47 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, to an uplifting story, truly inspiring in what can be the most unhealthy time of the year, because a 52-year-old mum from Plymouth has been named as Slimming World's Woman of the Year after losing an incredible 13 stones. Ali Ridgely began her incredible weight loss journey after her doctor wrote down on her medical notes that she thought she was morbidly obese, and those two words shocked her idea into action. And I'm delighted to say now we can speak with Ali about her astonishing achievement. Ali, I've got to say, I read your story. I find it genuinely inspiring, an incredible journey you've been on. Can we start at the beginning and what it was that shocked you into your amazing transformation?
Like I said, it was I saw it on the GP's screen, morbidly obese. And although the GP had mentioned my weight before being a problem, I just gave it there, yeah, okay. And when I think it was just the words, seeing it on the screen, it shocked me. And that was the light bulb moment that I thought to myself, I need to change this and I need to do it now.
And Ali, you'd put on weight because you're upset about a separation. This is something that many people can relate to. You indulged in food. Food became comfort. Food became your friend. Tell us about that part of your journey.
I had children, so I'd gained a little bit weight from there. And you just get complacent in relationships. Relationship broke down. And, yeah, you just turn to food. It is your comfort, emotional eating. A lot of us do that. And it just spiraled from there, really.
And at your heaviest, you were 23 stones. There's a wonderful line from the story when you went to, you joined Neil Fenton's Slimming World group and you got on the scales for the first time. And that's something that many people find incredibly daunting, especially when it's public. And you stepped on those scales and you saw your weight and they said something wonderful to you, didn't they?
The lady said, that's the last time you'll see that weight. And it just stuck in my mind because she had confidence that I would lose the weight with the plan. It works. And that was a real motivation. It was a motivator for me. And it stuck in my mind. And it was great. And I didn't see that weight ever again. And I won't.
And we can see pictures there. There are pictures of you now. Look in your dress there, looking very svelte. Literally half the woman you used to be. You lost half your body weight. An incredible transformation. Now everybody's going to want to know what's your secret. And you didn't cheat, did you? You didn't have any gastric bands or fat jabs?
No. It's all healthy eating, fruit and vegetables, lots of fruit and vegetables. And exercise as well helps for my weight loss. So Slimming World work.
So you were used to eating a huge amount. What was a typical day like in the bad old days, as it were?
I'd probably have, like for breakfast, I'd have toast, butter, jam, and then mid-morning would be biscuits or chocolate. Lunch would be probably a meal deal from the local shop. And again, that would consist of a big sandwich, crisps, chocolate, fizzy drinks. And then dinner would be something like a pie and mash or a takeaway. And again, in the evening, watching TV, a cup of tea or coffee with more chocolate or biscuits.
I've got to say, that sounds like one of my average days. I better watch out. But on a serious point, so how do you replace all of that? I mean, that's the kind of food that we're all talking about. It gives you that sugar rush, a lot of empty calories, a lot of fatty food. What's the new diet? What's the transformation? How do you still get those? We all crave those highs that food gives us. How do you get them now?
So I fill up on like fruit, so berries. I eat a lot of berries and vegetables. Low carbs, so I'll have pasta, potatoes, rice. So in my meals, I'm full up. So if I do have snacks, it might be, I still do have chocolate and treats. It's not that I don't have them, I do, but I just have them in more moderation. So I would have perhaps something low calorie snacks or treats.
And also, Ali, you talk about how exercise was out of the question for you in the past when you were at your heaviest. You simply couldn't entertain the notion, but then you discovered dancing and you sort of danced off the pounds as well as Easter. Tell us about that and try and help other people listening in to overcome that first barrier to get going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd got to about a 6 stone weight loss and I had more confidence and I felt fitter in myself. And I went to a dance class that was like the music was 80s and 90s, which is right up my street. And I absolutely loved it. And And from then on, I just had this love for it didn't feel like a workout. It just felt like a night out without the gin or the heels. So it was just like a really good way to get fit. And then through lockdown, that's when I did my diploma to teach dance fitness. For my advice that anyone wants to go with a friend. So make that, commitment to go with someone else, and you'll enjoy it. You won't regret it.
And Ali, so many people watching this now, they'll be inspired by your story, but they'll also be like worried about how do they get going themselves. So, and it's that feeling, isn't it, that the hardest step is the first step to take. What would you say to anybody listening in now who's feeling daunted about that first step? What's your advice?
I would say just go for it. The group support is phenomenal. You won't be judged. Nobody's judged. You're in a safe environment. Just, take that leap of faith and believe in yourself, like all of us have done.
Super stuff. Thank you very much for joining us. That's Ali Ridgely, Slimmer of the Year. Well done, Woman of the Year for Slimming World. An inspiring story. It really, really is an inspiring story. I saw it this morning, especially at Christmas. I thought, well, I need to lose a bit of weight myself. Don't we all find it harder this time of year? We're all about to overindulge. You know that I am. But it just goes to show you, once you get going, that first step is the hardest to take. I just find that story wonderful. I'm really glad that Ali came on. Well done to you, and well done to anybody else who's about to go on the same journey. Now, when we return, of course, we're talking more farmers. I'll be joined in the studio by another one of the campaign leaders as the rural community continues its fight against the government's inheritance tax. Will the government listen, or will the Prime Minister keep on ploughing the same old furrow? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. And here's your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It is sunny out there for some, but for most it's a cloudy afternoon once again, and there'll be mist and fog forming fairly widely overnight, either as a result of cloud lowering or clear skies leading to formation of fog patches. We've got high pressure centred over the UK, but for the vast majority that does mean that it's going to be, again, largely cloudy heading into the evening and overnight. Still some drizzly showers along the south coast and increasingly some drizzly rain pushing into the east and central part of England by dawn. That's accompanied by a lot of low cloud and mist. Meanwhile, for parts of Scotland, under clear skies, frost and fog patches as we begin Thursday. Certainly a chilly start for much of Scotland, with temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered glens, although eastern Scotland seeing a lot of cloud move in through the night, likewise for the north and the west. So here, frost-free, but it's inland where we'll see those frost and fog patches, some fog patches continuing into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, though, mostly cloudy, and the cloud lowering significantly across the Midlands, northern and eastern England, to give a misty, murky start in places. That also accompanied by drizzly rain. Mostly this rain's light, but it will be rather persistent for some eastern counties of England. So a gloomy and in places damp day to come. But bright skies hang on for parts of central Scotland at least. Here temperatures of 3 to 5 Celsius at best, further south 7 to 9 degrees. Now, overnight, the hole in the cloud across central Scotland will become increasingly small as cloud sinks southeast from the northwest and cloud further south encroaches as well. So Friday's a cloudy day. By Saturday and Sunday, it's turning wetter, but also milder.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley, Aberdeenshire. Firstly, the A90 is currently closed both ways between the A952 and the Bancar Hotel. A collision there is causing delays. Now, heading away from Manchester, the eastbound side of the A57, that's the Manchester Road, is blocked at the moment from the M67, that's Denton Junction 2, through towards Hyde, and obstruction is causing delays. Seeing big queues still for the M6 both ways. Southbound, a collision from Great Bar at 7 down towards Spaghetti at 6. is causing queues back to the M5 at 8, 2 lanes out. Queues to northbound 6 up to 7, heavy back to Castle Bromwich at 5. Whitehall in Westminster still seeing some big delays around Parliament Square and Horseguards Avenue. That follows an earlier demonstration, and a long queue anti-clock of the M25 still towards the Dartford tunnels. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Imagine getting the call to tell you that you've won £50,000 in tax-free cash, our biggest cash prize of the year.
Oh my God.
That's a big surprise.
Oh my God. This is amazing.
I'm in shock. That is absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting for you live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Also, Miriam Cates will be with me throughout the rest of the hour as we get the latest on the biggest stories from across the country, including our top story today. Has to be, of course, Farmageddon, because farmers have descended on Westminster to continue their fight against the government's changes to inheritance tax. But will the small farmers be heard, or will their cries for change fall once again on deaf ears? And with the Assad regime in Syria toppled, the UK government is now concerned that new Islamic terrorist groups could now rise out of its ashes. We'll have the latest on the development as the fighting continues, and could jihadists be on their way to Dover? And military housing has reached a new low, with MPs warning our armed forces live in accommodation that's no longer fit for purpose. 2/3 of that accommodation apparently is unfit for purpose. How on earth do we put our armed boys and girls at the back of the queue? And Merry Christmas, because Mick the Grinch Lynch has struck once again as train strikes again threaten thousands of families reuniting for Christmas. Avanti West Coast are the latest company to introduce a reduced timetable, and guess what? It's the 22nd, it's the 23rd, it's the 29th of December. Once again, Mick is trying to steal Christmas, and that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, to the show. Well, outside in Westminster today, there was a farmy army. Ollie Harrison here is one of the leaders of that unit, and Miriam Cates joins me in the studio. I want to quickly ask you, I thought Kemi Badenoch missed an open goal today. It was PMQs. She went in on immigration. There were 500 tractors outside, an army of farmers who she said on November the 19th, I've got your back. Do you think she made a bit of a mistake there?
I think probably it does look like that. I mean, the Leader of the Opposition gets 7 separate questions in PMQ. So, of course, immigration is important. There have been lots of announcements recently. She could have taken 3 questions on immigration immigration and 4 on farmers. So it does certainly look odd not to be responding to something that is so important, and also something that the Conservatives have a relatively good record on, certainly in comparison to immigration.
And you can't say you didn't know it was going on, because we all knew, and you could hear them.
Yes.
You could hear the tractors. You can hear them down here. We're 2 floors underground.
And of course, at the protest 2 weeks ago, Kemi did actually speak. She was invited to speak by the farmers and gave a well-received speech. So it does seem an odd choice. But of course, you know, Parliament has its own business, and MPs aren't always necessarily focused on what's going on outside. But given the scale of the problem, it is odd that at least one of her questions wasn't focused on that.
All she had to do is poke her head out the window, or even put her ear to the window. She'd have heard the farmy army outside. What do you reckon? Thank you, Miriam. What do you reckon? Did Kemi Badenoch made a mistake there by not listening to the farmers, by not sticking up for them at PMQs, and instead going for immigration, which she knows she's going to get slaughtered on, because the Conservatives, we heard last week, let net 1 million into the country almost. Now, get in touch, usual ways, gbnews.com/you'll say. Now, here's your news headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you, and good evening to you. Fast approaching 4 minutes past 5. Well, after years of what prosecutors have called horrific abuse, 3 members of Sara Sharif's family have been found guilty over her death today. Her father, Irfan Sharif, and stepmother, Bainash Batul, were convicted of murder, while her uncle, Faisal Malik, was found guilty of allowing her death. The 10-year-old suffered unimaginable violence at her home in Woking before her body was found last August. The convictions have sparked calls for urgent reform in child protection, with the Children's Commissioner warning of profound weaknesses in the system. Sentencing for the trio has been set for next Tuesday. Well, earlier, the Detective Chief Inspector of the case, Craig Emerson, says it has shocked and horrified people around the world.
Sara's young life was brought to an end as a result of the brutal abuse and unspeakable violence inflicted on her by Sharif, Batul, which Malik did nothing to prevent.
Thousands of farmers have been driving tractors into Westminster today, demanding that the government rethinks its plans to impose a 20% inheritance tax on land worth over £1 million. Chancellor Rachel Reeves insists most farmers won't be affected, but critics say the changes threaten livelihoods, heritage and food security. Earlier, protesters held a minute's silence for farmers who lost their lives to stress and financial pressures. Calls for a pause and consultation from the government grow louder, but Downing Street says the policy won't change.
This is the death of farming that's going to happen under this government. So we want to mark that, but once we get to Parliament, you give them what for. We're here to make a noise. This is a war, we will win, and the government will do a U-turn. That is determined by all of us to push that.
Meanwhile, inside the Commons earlier, Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch clashed over immigration at Prime Minister's questions. The opposition leader criticised the Prime Minister's record on immigration, claiming that he'd consistently backed criminals entering the UK.
The Prime Minister signed a letter demanding that foreign criminals be allowed to stay in Britain. Dozens of Labour and Liberal Democrat MPs repeatedly signed these letters, insisting that rapists and murderers be allowed to stay here. Will he apologise for signing these letters?
But the Prime Minister hit back, accusing the Conservatives of losing control of the borders.
I'm glad she now wants to talk about immigration. Last week she said she didn't, and for good reason, because the previous government presided over record high levels of immigration. The figures just a few weeks ago, nearly 1 million on net migration. That is unprecedented. A one-nation experiment in open borders under the last government. And she was the champion. She stood up and praised the then Tory Home Secretary for listening to her on removing caps on migration visas. So she was applauding it. Now she's furious about what she was campaigning for. We will drive it down. We will drive down lawful migration. We'll drive down illegal migration.
Police are investigating dozens of individuals at the Post Office and Fujitsu, the tech company, following the wrongful prosecution of hundreds of sub-postmasters. A team of 100 officers is reviewing 1.5 million documents related to the scandal as they consider charges including perjury and perverting the course of justice. So far, 3 people have been questioned, with plans to interview more next year. Commander Stephen Clayman, who's leading the investigation, has described the scale as unprecedented and stressed that the investigation will take time, with trials possibly not happening until 2027. Former sub-postmasters who were among those wrongfully accused of theft say the delay is quite disgusting, but acknowledge there is a need for a thorough investigation. A ban on puberty blockers for children under the age of 18 in the UK is now indefinite after experts found their use posed an unacceptable safety risk. The Commission on Human Medicines recommended the restrictions remain in place until further evidence ensures the drug's safety for children with gender dysphoria. Baroness Cass, who led a review into children's gender care, has welcomed the move, describing the drugs as powerful with unproven benefits and significant risks. And Saudi Arabia is set to host the 2034 World Cup, confirmed by FIFA today. That decision to award Saudi Arabia the World Cup in 2034, though, has sparked backlash from politicians here at home who have condemned it as sports washing. Labour MP Andy Slaughter called the move complete sports washing, highlighting the kingdom's poor human rights record, especially in its use of capital punishment. Meanwhile, former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith also criticised FIFA, accusing the organisation of prioritising money over human rights. Those are the latest headlines for now. Your next update from the newsroom in half an hour. Now, though, it's back to Martin in Westminster.
Thank you, Sam. Now let's get cracking, because furious farmers have once again descended on Westminster today to continue their protest against the government's changes to inheritance tax. And one farmer made it very clear what he thought about the government's attitude towards British agriculture.
This is the death of farming that's going to happen under this government. So we want to mark that. But once we get to Parliament, you give them what for. We're here to make a noise. This is a war. We will win. And the government will do a U-turn. That is determined by all of us to push that.
Well, that's Matt Cullen there and Liz Webster, 2 of the leaders, the organisers of today's protest. But are they getting their message across? Are they listening in Parliament? Well, they couldn't fail to hear them. The tractors were blaring out their horns for hours. I was there, just about got my hearing back. Now, joining me now in the studio to discuss this is the former editor of the Labour List, Peter Edwards, and the farmer and the spiritual leaders. One of them, certainly, which makes you blush, but it's true. And that's Mr. Ollie Harrison. Ollie, let's start with you. So, second time now in only a few weeks that farmers have amassed in Westminster. Last time you're on foot, this time you're on tractors. I noticed there was nothing attached to the tractors, no attempt, for example, to spread any silage at this time, any rate. Do you think they're listening to you?
I'd like to think so. So we've spoke to a few ministers or advisors to ministers, and they are, by the sounds of things, a little bit embarrassed, but they've not actually publicly come out and said that. So half of me is like, quietly confident, but then the other half of me, every time I hear this 22 billion back hole, I think if you put £1 in it every time you said it, you would be OK.
Good point. But today, the government has said that they're injecting £343 million into the rural economy, and it's going to be over £5 billion into the farming budget. So they've announced that today. So what have you got to moan about?
So the 350 million is paying us for work that we've just done over the last 12 months for them, for their environmental stuff that they wanted us to deliver where we stopped growing food. The 5 billion is over 2 years, and it's less than the previous government were doing each year to keep us in business, to insulate us from bad weather.
So today I was out there, as I said, very carnival atmosphere, very joyous, very celebratory. The farmers were in fine fettle, but will that work? There's constant talk of some kind of escalation, and here we go again, it's Christmas. Mick Lynch has just said that the train drivers are going on strike again. Strikes seem to work. Strikes got train drivers, 3-day week, £60,000 a year, a £500 million pay rise. At the time you boys went on strike.
Well, it's looking that way, isn't it? Or, maybe we should join them. They seem to know what to do there, don't they? It'd be a shame if tractors started breaking down on level crossings. I just don't get it. Like, we want a conversation. We know what they were trying to do. They were trying to get the £1 billion tax dodgers buying farmland, and they've just completely missed the target by putting the bar too low. We want a conversation. The EFA have met today to discuss food security over these, this budget, shall we say. Hopefully they'll be listened to. and we might get some progress or get an open conversation with them.
Peter Edwards, isn't that what needs to happen next? I've had four farmer leaders in today alone now, and I was out on the streets earlier, and they want to be listened to, they want to talk, and I think these gentlemen all agree that the big landowners, those who are gaming the system by buying land to dodge tax, who aren't really farmers at all, they perhaps should get the focus of the government. But in making it about all farmers, in a similar way, actually, it's about all pensioners lost their winter fuel allowance. Have the Labour Party simply bitten off more than they can chew? And should they sit down with the farmers and try and reach some kind of compromise before it escalates further?
Well, negotiation's always good, and I say that having worked in Westminster and run a small company, but just it's not the case that all pensioners will lose their winter fuel allowance, so it's not the case that all farmers will be caught by this tax change. The one figure most often quoted by the government is that for a married couple who own a farm, their tax-free threshold would go up to £5 million. Yet, if I was married, for my wife and I, it would be £1 million. So even after this change, which I understand farmers are concerned about because they often survive on a margin, if they survive economically at all, but even if this change goes ahead, which I think it will, farmers will still be treated much more favourably than the rest of society in terms of inheritance tax.
Ollie, over to you.
It's 3 million, not 5, if you can get the right circumstances, which not many farms meet. But that's regardless. Firstly, why should anyone pay inheritance tax? Secondly, why should a business pay inheritance tax? And thirdly, why should a business that can't control its output cost pay inheritance tax? That is the difference with agriculture. That is why we get a subsidy to stay in business. We talked about the trains before. 11.5 billion the trains get. Last time I checked, I don't need a train 3 times a day to be alive. You know, let's just think about where food comes from and what farmers are doing every single day.
It is worth pointing out that a total abolishment of inheritance tax would lose the Exchequer billions and billions of pounds. So there's an understandable reason why they would want it to be as it is. Have you got that clip that I could show you of Sir Keir Starmer? Sir Keir Starmer addressed the NFU conference, I think, last October. We're going to call that up in a minute. I want to show that to you because, to both of you, it appears to show something of a U-turn. Let's get that clip now. This is Keir Starmer addressing the National Farmers Union back in October, before the general election.
Every day seems to bring a new existential risk to British farming. Losing a farm is not like losing any other business. It can't come back.
See, Sir Keir Starmer there, Peter Edwards, is saying exactly what the farmers are saying now. Farms aren't like any other businesses. If you break them up, they don't come back. He said one thing before the election, and now once again, this is something that people get very annoyed about Sir Keir Starmer. He's got a completely different position. Now he's in power.
I'm not sure that's fair, and I think if you break up any family business, it tends to be gone forever. Take the family greengrocer, for example. If you break that up, that service is more likely to be offered by a nationwide multi-billion-pound global supermarket. So that applies to any small business. But I want to make one other point based on what Ollie said, which Ollie said in reference to government subsidies for the rail industry. You don't need to get a train to live. But actually, many people do. I and millions of others get the train to work every day to earn a salary.
What about Christmas? We're all drop dead then. We can't get home. They go on strike to get what they want. The farmers are playing by Queensberry rules.
Well, I don't think that's the case. And sadly, now I've got huge respect for farmers, and I have some friends in the farming community in Scotland, but there's a minority of farmers today saying will bring the country to a standstill and saying this is war on the clip you showed earlier. And again,
but you support the train drivers for going on strike. I mean, the Labour Party backed the unions who are going on strike. What's the difference? Why don't you back the farmers?
Well, first of all, I don't think you should say we're going on to war. And imagine a rail union leader had said that. I'd imagine there'd be condemnation from an awful lot of newspapers. Secondly, I've got a lot of sympathy for farmers. A lot of issues about surviving on a margin, loneliness, trying to keep a vital part of our food infrastructure going, ensuring the longevity of your kind of household economic situation. But they're only being brought back to a lesser inheritance tax standard than the rest of us. They still, even after this change, enjoy enormous tax benefits.
OK, final word to you, Ollie Harrison.
He just said we get tax benefits. Why is that? Because they do have some understanding of how fragile the agricultural industry is, because we are the only people that are price takers, not price setters. And as for the trains, you can still get a car or walk, but what else can you eat?
Superb, sir. Thank you very much, Ollie Harrison and Peter Edwards. A spirited debate. Thank you very, very much. This one will go on and on and on. But will the government listen or change their position? Will they plough the same old furrow? It's time now for our biggest and greatest Great British giveaway this year, and your chance to win £50,000 in tax-free cash. It's the biggest cash prize that we've ever given away here at GB News, and it could all be yours. And here's the details that you need to win a whopping £50,000 in tasty cash.
It's the biggest, greatest Great British giveaway so far, with your chance to win a spectacular £50,000 in tax-free cash. 2025 could be amazing, with plenty of treats, holidays and fun on the horizon. How would you enjoy that cash? £50,000 will make someone our biggest ever winner. For another chance to win £50,000 cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Get stuck in now. Coming up next, we delve into the real state. It's a total state of housing for our armed forces heroes, as MPs warn that many current sites are simply not fit for purpose. An astonishing 2/3 of armed forces housing is not fit for purpose. What on earth is going on? That's next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And the latest series of Big Brother has just wrapped up, and as always, the housemates managed to cause a stir.
Yeah, that's an understatement. After 5 weeks of drama and twists and turns, 6 housemates were left to battle it out for a £90,000 prize.
Well, our next guest was there to the bitter end, coming third in this year's competition.
6 weeks you were in there.
Oh, I tell you what, it was a long time.
What goes through your mind? Is it do you start to go a bit sort of what do they call it, cabin fever?
Yeah.
Do you go a bit nutty?
Like at times, not that I've ever been in prison, but I kind of likened it to being in jail, particularly when we were having to eat the porridge with water, no sugar, or that was difficult. And the feeling that you just can't leave. I mean, you can, but it was, you
can, but you won't get your hands on that prize money.
No, exactly.
You made it to the end.
Yeah.
And it's quite a big house, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you feel as though you can get away from housemates if they're annoying you a bit, or does it feel like your hot house with people you don't like very much?
If you're sort of, if you're not comfortable with a certain conversation or something like that, you can always take yourself and move away. But can you have time to yourself? No. Not really. I mean, even you might think, do you know what, I'll just go and lock myself in the toilet for a few minutes. There's a camera and there's a mic in there, so you can't escape that. And then you're obviously wearing a mic, so there is that little feeling of, I could just do with having 5 minutes to myself, but you can't really get it.
You've met up with one side of the house, but not the other side yet. But is that still on the cards, do you think?
I hope so, because I liked every single person in that house, despite a few whispers on the internet, like, do you not like this? I liked everybody in the house, never had a bad word with anybody, so...
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:22 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, the real and the desperate state of housing for the armed forces has today been exposed by a group of MPs who claim that some personnel are living next to serious damp and mould. The Defence Committee also says that many sites are already unfit for purpose and have even warned that thousands of forces personnel could leave the armed services if these issues are not resolved quickly. Well, I'm joined in the studio to discuss this with Miriam Case. Miriam, this absolutely astonished me earlier on. It's a 55-page report called the Service Accommodation Report. I had Tan Dacey in earlier on. He's the chair of the Defence Committee, the MP for Slough for the Labour Party. They're saying that the situation is dire, shocking. 2/3 of those homes in such a poor condition, they are essentially no longer fit for purpose. How did we get to a situation where we're putting substandard accommodation for our own armed forces personnel, and yet we're spending billions of pounds on hotels for asylum seekers?
I mean, it is absolutely shocking, and you think these are people who, in theory at least, are prepared to give their lives for our country. Their families don't have it easy either. You know, if you marry into the army, you commit to being moved around from place to place, your children changing school. At the very least, you'd expect that their accommodation is good quality, and probably when it's built, it was. It's just it hasn't been maintained. It's been allowed to deteriorate. And, of course, there isn't unlimited money. We know there have been defence cuts over the years, but it's clearly now at the point where it's unacceptable, and it's also going to put people off from joining and staying in the army. So it needs sorting out, but it's going to cost billions and billions of pounds.
But it's a question of choices. It's a question of priorities. And as I said before, if we can spend £8 billion per annum, which we do, on unemployment benefits for those born overseas, £6 billion is the price of the asylum system. Is it 11 billion quid on foreign climate aid, 22 billion quid on carbon capture? We can find the money for pet projects. We can find the money when it works. But to learn that our own armed services personnel, let's face it, are living in situations that a human rights lawyer would say aren't fit for asylum seekers. They've been treated like dogs.
That's right. And I think there are two problems here. Firstly, it's a question of wrong priorities. And it's not just over accommodation that we've treated our armed forces badly. I mean, look at all these kind of historical allegations. There was a case reported yesterday of false allegations against Iraqi veterans. We treat our armed forces veterans very badly indeed. That's certainly the case. But we also have a broader problem with our state in that we're happy to spend money day to day on different things that crop up and increase the welfare bills and increase this. But we seem very resistant to any kind of capital projects, and this would be a capital project. It needs an injection of billions of pounds as a one-off or over several years to improve this housing, and we just seem really bad at doing that as a state. It doesn't matter whether it's a big infrastructure transport project or whether it's improving housing. We're happy to fritter away our money, but we're not so good at spending it on capital projects, and I think this is a prime example of that.
Do you think it's also a case of we've seen to become very good at firefighting? When there's chaos, like when illegal immigrants pour over the channel, when we have chaos in Ukraine or Hong Kong, justifiably we step in. Where there's a will, there's a way. Then we could always find the money to sort a crisis, but we don't seem to have any common sense in terms of forward planning for things like this.
That's it. I think as a state we're living hand to mouth, and if you look how British government has been run, and indeed a lot of Western governments have been run for the last 30, 40 years, we've just borrowed more and more and more money. There's always a reason to borrow more money. Then inflation goes up. Then your interest debt goes up. Now we're paying £100 billion a year just in debt interest payments. Imagine if we didn't have that debt and could spend that money on our armed forces. And so, of course, we're living hand to mouth. There's always some more money for somebody who arrives in a small boat. There's always some more money to send something over to Ukraine. But big investment projects get pushed by the wayside. And really, it needs a total reform of our economic system in order to be able to do projects like this.
Now, Miriam, you're covering the show tomorrow. Thank you very much. You're going to do a fantastic job. You had to walk on the way here today through the farmers' protests, so you've seen them, you've heard them. Do you think that this show of force is going to have an impact? Or do you think now there's an absolute situation of loggerheads, Sir Keir Starmer is going to dig in, the farmers are being polite for now? Or do you think that where there's a will, there's a way here, there could be a healthy compromise?
Well, I think it's certainly having a massive political impact. It's certainly helping the cause of Nigel Farage and Reform, and to a lesser extent the Conservative Party, who are sticking up for the farmers. And I think their support has been very welcome. So I think it's going to have a political impact. It's also increasing public support for farmers. Of course, sometimes when industries strike, their public support goes down. But I think people are very, very sympathetic to the plight of farmers who often work very hard for minimum wage and yet are now being asked to pay these enormous tax bills. But will the government back down? I don't know. I think they've gone so far down this route now, it'd be difficult to. One thing they could do, and has been suggested today actually by one of the groups that proposed the tax change in the first place, is that they could raise the threshold from 1 million to something. I mean, that's a possibility. Perhaps they could say more people have been caught than we anticipated. We've got our figures wrong. We're going to raise the threshold. But they dug in over the winter fuel allowance. And I think they saw what happened to Boris Johnson when he did U-turn frequently, that he lost a lot of authority. So perhaps, unfortunately, I think they're going to dig in.
And you see, the thing is, I've now had 4 of the leaders of this opposition, this movement, this new farming revolution in the studio just today alone. And they've all said to me, we'd like to sit down with the government, we just want to be heard, and we agree with the government. Going after the fake farmers who buy land to dodge tax, they are a justifiable target. But what's happened, they keep saying, is the blunderbuss approach is going for hard-working smallholders who don't fall into the same bracket. And so could there not be a means-testing compromise to make sure that Sir Keir Starmer can still go after the right targets, but also show some support for those who are keeping literally our bread and butter on the table?
Absolutely. I do think they really need to sit down and talk, because at the heart of the disagreement there does seem to be a mismatch between the figures that the farmers and the farmers' unions are putting forward in terms of how many farmers are going to be affected, and the numbers that the government and the Treasury are going to say, and they don't agree on their maths, essentially. So they should sit down and work out who's wrong and why. And I suspect what's happened is that the government's looked at the figures of people who claim this relief. Some of them are genuine farmers and some of them are smallholders, or some of them may be big landowners. So the government doesn't actually know how many actual farmers who are really producing our food, making our bread, it's going to affect. So yes, absolutely, they should be sitting down together. But I think the government will have been shocked by the scale of the protests and also the public support for farmers, and so hopefully they will listen.
Great stuff, Miriam Gates. Thank you very much. And I'm delighted to say I'm now joined in the studio by the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartledge, MP. James, it was a pleasure to have your company. We're going back, of course, to the report out today. I find it astonishing. It's called service accommodation. Unbelievable. 2/3 of service family homes are in such a poor condition. They're essentially no longer fit for purpose. How on earth did we get to this point, and what needs to be done to put it right?
Oh, so look, the first thing to say, so when I became Minister of Defence Procurement in April 23, I was responsible for the defence estate. I had a housing background before. The first visit I made to a barracks where I saw the accommodation, I'd heard obviously about it, and I saw it was very poor, much of it. Now, the first thing to say is it is fundamental that the nature of the properties on the defence estate, many of them have intractable problems, and so the issues like damp and mould will arise because of the nature of the property. So what do we do about it? Well, in the winter before I became Minister, we had let families down, you know, boilers not being fixed on time, etc., in the middle of winter. So last winter, I set out something called the Winter Plan. We had £400 million of extra money from the government, the previous government, obviously, and we put in place thousands of treatments of damp and mould and so on, and a far better performance. And if you actually read the committee report in full, as I'm sure you've done, I think it's page 21, paragraph 70, where they talk about the fact that we did deliver, and we did deliver on those promises, because that's all you can do, unfortunately. The nature of those homes is in too many cases, they need to be rebuilt from scratch. You just can't suddenly do that. So we prioritise putting in the damp and mould treatments and so on, but I totally would admit to your viewers, the estate much of it is not in the sort of condition we want for the people who serve in our armed forces.
And James Cartledge, let's be blunt about this. If a human rights lawyer went into an accommodation like this and just say, for example, it was earmarked for an asylum seeker, they wouldn't let them move in. they would deem a lot of these things unfit for human habitation, and then they'd be put into a nice four-star hotel. And so those rules apply there. Why don't those rules apply to our armed forces?
But hold on. Of course they do. Our armed forces wouldn't go into accommodation in that state, just to be absolutely clear. I know people, it's very emotive, the asylum point. I never saw any accommodation that was used for that. My focus was on the accommodation that was used for armed forces personnel.
Two-thirds of it is unfit for human occupation. That's what the report says.
I don't think it says two-thirds of the accommodation is not fit for human habitation.
In such a poor condition, they are no longer fit for purpose. Two-thirds of service family homes. That's the finding of the report.
OK, well, all I can say is the sort of experience I've... If you randomly selected a base in the UK, an army base, say in the UK, or it could be Navy or whatever, but if you randomly selected an army base in the UK, you would probably find typically these relatively small houses that look like a standard council block that you'd be used to. In many cases, the design of them is such that they've struggled to cope with basic things like having showers put in, so the damp and mould issue's been perennial. So you have to be open about the nature of the estate. Ideally, and this is what I wanted to do, obviously you'd knock them down and rebuild. Yeah. That's the best thing we can do, but you can't suddenly do that. So we had to focus on remediating the problems that were there. In the worst cases, we had to prioritise. So lots of help with damp and mould, but also things like new doors, other things that help with insulation and deal with those sorts of problems. But you're right, the state of a lot of the housing is not good enough. I don't think, from my experience, two-thirds is below human habitation. I think that the figure we actually had was 90% conformed to the minimum standards that existed. The other thing you've got to remember, if you take... So that's service family accommodation, which is generally houses for military families. The single living accommodation, which is, I guess you'd describe a bit like student accommodation for armed forces personnel, that also varies greatly. But actually, when I was there were some really good examples of investment going in. I suppose the fundamental problem is, with any military budget, you typically prioritise capability and the front line, or at least, your platforms, your capabilities to support your ability to fight. Have all governments always prioritised the basic things like accommodation? Probably not. Yeah. But all I can say is when I was there, we did put in 400 million extra. It's a big increase in funding. Okay. And one thing that isn't included in this report, it doesn't mention anything about the current government. They have not indicated at all whether they're going to match that sort of level of funding.
Well, that all remains to be seen. Thank you very much for joining us. James Coleridge, MP, of course, Shadow Defence Secretary, and Miriam Cates. Excellent stuff. Thank you to you both. Now, loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. But first, here's your headlines, and it's Sam Francis.
Martin, thank you. It's just after 5:30. Well, after years of what prosecutors called horrific abuse, 3 members of Sara Sharif's family have today been found guilty over her death. Her father, Irfan Sharif, and stepmother, Bainash Batul, were convicted of murder, while her uncle, Faisal Malik, was found guilty of allowing her death. The 10-year-old suffered unimaginable violence at her home in Woking before her body was found last August. The convictions have sparked calls for urgent reform in child protection, with the Children's Commissioner warning of profound weaknesses in the system. Sentencing has been set for next Tuesday. Well, earlier outside the court in London, Detective Chief Inspector Craig Emerson said the case has shocked and horrified people around the world.
Sara's young life was brought to an end as a result of the brutal abuse and unspeakable violence inflicted on her by Sharif, Batul, which Malik did nothing to prevent.
Thousands of farmers have been driving tractors through Westminster today, demanding the government rethinks plans to impose an inheritance tax on farms worth over £1 million. Chancellor Rachel Reeves insists most farmers won't be affected, but critics say the changes threaten livelihoods, heritage and food security. Earlier, protesters held a minute's silence for farmers who have been lost to stress and financial pressures. Calls for a pause from the government and consultation are growing louder, but Downing Street says the policy won't be changing.
This is the death of farming that's going to happen under this government. So we want to mark that, but once we get to Parliament, you give them what for. We're here to make a noise. This is a war, we will win, and the government will do a U-turn. That is determined by all of us to push that.
A neo-Nazi extremist's terror plot to intimidate migrants at a London law firm was thwarted thanks to bravery of a receptionist there. Cavan Medlock from Harrow appeared at Kingston Crown Court today after attempting to attack solicitors in September 2020. Footage shows Medlock arriving with a 6-inch knife before being tackled in a violent struggle. Despite his threats, including admitting he was there to kill, Medlock was disarmed by the receptionist and detained by staff. He's due to be sentenced tomorrow. And Saudi Arabia will host the 2034 World Cup, confirmed today by FIFA. The decision to award Saudi Arabia the World Cup has sparked backlash from politicians, though, who have condemned it as a sports washing. Labour MP Andy Slaughter called the move complete sports washing, highlighting the kingdom's poor human rights record, especially its use of capital punishment. Meanwhile, former Conservative leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith also criticised FIFA, accusing the organisation of prioritising money over human rights. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'll be back with you for a full roundup at 6 o'clock, and Martin will be back with you after this break.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It is sunny out there for some, but for most it's a cloudy afternoon once again, and there'll be mist and fog forming fairly widely overnight, either as a result of cloud lowering or clear skies leading to formation of fog patches. We've got high pressure centred over the UK, but for the vast majority that does mean that it's going to be, again, largely cloudy heading into the evening and overnight. Still some drizzly showers along the south coast and increasingly some drizzly rain pushing into the east and central part of England by dawn. That accompanied by a lot of low cloud and mist. Meanwhile, for parts of Scotland, under clear skies, frost and fog patches as we begin Thursday. Certainly a chilly start for much of Scotland, with temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered glens, although eastern Scotland seeing a lot of cloud move in through the night, likewise for the north and the west. So here, frost-free, but it's inland where we'll see those frost and fog patches, some fog patches continuing into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, though, mostly cloudy, and the cloud lowering significantly across the Midlands, northern and eastern England, to give a misty, murky start in places. That also accompanied by drizzly rain. Mostly this rain's light, but it will be rather persistent for some eastern counties of England. So a gloomy and in places damp day to come. But bright skies hang on for parts of central Scotland at least. Here temperatures of 3 to 5 Celsius at best, further south 7 to 9 degrees. Now, overnight, the hole in the cloud across central Scotland will become increasingly small as cloud sinks southeast from the northwest and cloud further south encroaches as well. So Friday's a cloudy day. By Saturday and Sunday, it's turning wetter, but also milder.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long delays in West Yorkshire on the M62. The motorway is partly blocked westbound at junction 23, the Huddersfield turnoff, at the scene of an accident on the M6 in the West Midlands. 2 lanes are closed southbound from junction 7 to 6 towards Birmingham for recovery work following an accident. Tailback stretch all the way back to the M5 interchange. And in Lincolnshire, just northeast of Coningsby, the A153 has been closed from Kirkby-on-Bane to Tumby because of an accident. Very slow still in central London following that earlier demonstration through Westminster. However, all restrictions have been lifted. There are still long queues back along Victoria Embankment, around Trafalgar Square, back to Waterloo Bridge and Hyde Park Corner, looking at the cameras. And on the Underground, Bakerloo Line trains are suspended from Kenton to Harrow and the Wealdstone. It's all down to a power failure, as we understand from TfL. That's the very latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 5:41 with me, Martin Daubney, here on GB News. Now, an 18-year-old man has been sentenced to 1 year in a Dubai jail for having sexual relationship with a 17-year-old girl, according to a campaign group. Marcus Fakana from Tottenham, London, was with his parents in Dubai in August when a holiday romance blossomed with another Londoner. who has since turned 18 now. After returning home and seeing pictures and chats, the girl's mother reported the relationship to Dubai's police, who then arrested Fakana at his hotel. Well, joining us now is the human rights campaigner David Hay, who has been working with Marcus's family. David, always a pleasure to have you on the show. An astonishing story, and one that could have happened to many, many thousands of teenagers. But this is an incredible case. Tell us more.
Exactly, Martin. I mean, good afternoon. It's just yet another horror show of yet another British life looking like it's going to be ruined by injustices in Dubai. We see so many of these, you know, and in Marcus's case, you know, something that wouldn't be illegal in this country. You know, there would be nothing wrong with someone from London, you know, two people from London having a romantic relationship at those ages. In Dubai, however, that is technically breaking the law. And it really is a horror show. And it's, you know, it's very easy in cases like this to blame Dubai. But the situation we've got here is that, you know, Dubai is promoted by, whether it's celebrities, even our own politicians. You know, even Keir Starmer was there on Sunday, a day before the trial of this young man. Nothing was done to help him.
Is it not fair to say, though, that when in Rome, you obey the rules of the host nation? Marcus had sex with a 17-year-old. Now, that's not illegal in Britain. And the girl is in question, she wasn't from Dubai, right? She's also another Briton. And yet the rules within that country state quite simply that the age of consent is 18. So he has broken the laws in that country. That's what they're trying to get him on, right?
I think you've got a very good point there, I think. But the thing that sets Dubai apart here is that the people that run Dubai and the people that promote it is something very different. So all the people watching now, I'm sure when they look at Dubai, they think it's fine to go there and go to designer nightclubs and hang around on beaches and drink and do all of these things that you would do, for instance, in Ibiza. When the reality is that the laws are very little different to Saudi. It simply isn't safe. So it's misrepresentation of that country by celebrities, by influencers, by politicians. So, of course, ignorance of the law is no defence. But that's the problem that you've got. If you ask, I think, any kind of young person of Marcus's age or many people, is Dubai the perfect place for a holiday? Everybody would say yes. The reality is very, very different.
And so do you feel, in one sense, David Hay, this has become like a cause célèbre now? Dubai making an example of Marcus Fakana. Has he become political capital to try and send a message out to the world that we won't take this? And he's simply been caught in the crossfire.
Well, absolutely. And I think what you're seeing here as well, because the family chose to go to the media before the hearing, you're seeing revenge sentencing. You know, this is Dubai, and they've done it many times before. Angry that their country is, you know, their state has been brought up and their damage to their reputation. So it's a revenge sentence. I mean, this is something that, in the event that this has happened, you know, a deportation would have been more than sufficient. You know, you don't need to detain an 18-year-old for a period of a year in a foreign country. You know, so that is a ridiculous sentence. And I do think you've got revenge sentencing going on here. And it's happened again many times. A lot of families think their only option is to go to the media for help because the Foreign Office is useless. They do that. That upsets the powers that be in Dubai, and you get a revenge sentence.
Okay, thank you very much, David Hay, for joining us. That's the case of Marcus Fakana, who's now in jail for a year after a holiday romance in Dubai. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Let's have a quick chat with you, Miriam Case. You are nodding along there. I mean, is there a case of he's been unfairly treated? Because, you know, this is something he would normally have done in Britain. Or is this a case of if you fall foul of the rules in a foreign country, I'm afraid them's the rubs?
Well, obviously, it's hard not to feel sorry for him and his family. I mean, the shock of a teenager being sent to jail in a foreign country for a year for doing something in this country which is not even approaching illegal is obviously tragic for him and the family. But I do think that countries have the right to make and to uphold their own laws. I mean, that's what national sovereignty means. And if, let's say, you know, in this country, you have to be 17 to drive. If an American teenager, age 16 with a driving licence, came over here and drove a car, that would be against the law, and we would be entitled to prosecute them. And I think, you know, whether he didn't know the law or whatever it was, obviously feel incredibly sorry for him, but that is their law. And so, you know, they are entitled to uphold it. And I think, although obviously there's a compassionate case here, if they did make a special exception for him, then clearly that would be known about. And it would be, you know, this would become a habit in Dubai that they don't want. Now, we can criticise their law and say it's not liberal, it's not what we do. But nevertheless, it is their country and it is their right to uphold the law.
Fair point. Thank you very much, Miriam Case. gates. Now, we've got a statement to read out, and in a previous statement, prosecutors said this: under UAE law, the girl is legally classified as a minor, and in accordance with procedures recognised internationally, her mother, being the legal guardian, filed the complaint. And Dubai's legal system is committed to protecting the rights of all individuals and ensuring impartial judicial proceedings. So quite simply, they're saying, that's the law, you broke it, and we're standing by our guns. Now, up next, could you be forced to drive home for Christmas? Because guess what? Mick the Grinch Lynch has struck again on key dates. You never believe it. The 22nd, the 23rd, the 29th of December have just been cancelled by the train unions. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recruiters are warning that if you're not tech savvy, you could be missing out with your CV failing to make it through an AI-powered sifting process. So we've gone from sort of computer says no HR people ticking boxes to AI, right? Is that right?
Yes, well, this applies once you're in the job as well, as a recent report revealed that employees expect AI will manage an average of a third of their tasks within the next 12 months. Well, joining us now to discuss this is Cosmo Curry, founder of Van Kuysen, a leading company in technology recruitment.
Morning, Cosmo.
Morning.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Ben.
Well,
Hi,
yeah,
pleasure.
thank you for joining us. It's very interesting, isn't it? Because AI is, of course, on the rise, and now in the workplace and in universities and things. Another article came to mind. There was a student recently, I think it was in the news just the other day, that got in trouble for using AI. So there's, you know, for exam purposes and essays. So there's lots of different ways that it can be a good thing and a bad thing. But you're, of course, here to talk about the ways in which AI is a good thing within the workplace.
Absolutely. I mean, AI is here to stay, for sure. And we're seeing this rise of people using it in such a clever format. And the other side of it is also we're seeing people who are using it and during the process of that, they are losing their character. We're losing the actual insight into the individual behind that. And so we've kind of got this kind of mix. And I think AI is phenomenal when you're looking at it from a point of view of optimization, point of view of speed, getting results. But I think we have to remember that, you know, the fundamental of recruitment is people. And we cannot substitute the people, the personal aspect, by replacing that with AI.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 10 to 6. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, Christmas reunions are once again under threat, with Avanti West Coast trains announcing yet another strike for 3 days over the festive period. Walkouts have been scheduled, obviously, for key dates such as the 22nd, the 23rd and the 29th of December for all Avanti services after staff rejected the company's proposals for rest day working arrangements. Around 300 train managers are expected to join the walkout, and who better to discuss this terrible news with than the travel correspondent at the Independent, Simon Calder. Simon, Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without a train strike. There you are, there's a train behind you. Try and hold it on the platform till the 22nd of December, mate. Mick the Grinch Lynch is at it again. He's trying to steal Christmas.
Oh, sure, yes. And look, we were told, I'm pretty sure, by the first Labour Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, that everything was going to get much better and that all the strikes would be called off. But here we are again. It's Christmas, and just like Mariah Carey and Wham, we've got rail strikes. Now, these ones, exactly as you say, are about rest day working and how much money train managers get for working on their day off. And they say, look, actually, management people, when they get called in at the last minute, they are much more prepared. They get more cash than this. So we're going to go on strike. And yes, it's going to absolutely traumatize the journeys of tens of thousands of passengers who would be traveling from London Euston to Birmingham to Manchester to Liverpool to Glasgow, North Wales, Cumbria, you name it. It's going to put people off travelling. And, yeah, they will be switching to their cars, to the coaches, maybe to flights if they're talking about getting from Glasgow to London. And the thing is, Martin, that this just does exactly what we were hoping would change. It says to everybody, yep, your train is going to be desperately unreliable, and therefore we'd be much better off actually driving. And with rail revenue so fallen after COVID that taxpayers are subsidising it by subsidising the running of the railways by £400 a second. You've got to get people back. You've got to get them confident. But the rail unions clearly think that this is a fight worth taking.
Well, Simon Calder, if I were you, mate, I'd just hop on that train behind you. I don't know, maybe hijack it. Just make sure that one just stays there for Christmas, mate. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. I'm not encouraging hijacking of trains. That's just a little poor joke for the end of the show. Thank you, Simon Calder. Miriam Cates, we're joking, but this is abject misery. Here we are again. It's Christmas. You can depend on train strikes the same way you can depend on, I don't know, mid-afternoon flatulence.
Well, you'll leave that to you, Martin. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to be affected by this, just like so many others. I think I'm going to be presenting GB News from my Christmas table at this rate, because I don't know how I'm going to get in. But just to put an alternative point of view, train workers are well paid compared to other people in other sectors. Now, why is that actually a bad thing? Isn't that just a case to show that unionised work, when they have collective bargaining power, they keep wages up?
You're in a socialist that's going out for Christmas.
Exactly. And OK, this is annoying. And OK, you can argue that, you know, they've already had good pay rises. But actually, we have a huge problem in this country with too much poorly paid work. One of the reasons that so many people are on disability benefits and out of work benefits is because there's no longer a good pay rise to go into work. And actually, if more of our workers were unionised and did have bargaining power, perhaps that wouldn't be the case.
Wow.
That might not be a popular position with your viewers, but it does point to the fact we don't want ultra-low wage work, do we?
Well, I've got to leave it there. Miriam, I've got to cut you off short now, but you're back in this chair tomorrow. Miriam Case is hosting the show for me. I have a couple of days off. I've got so much holiday backed, but don't worry, she'll be absolutely fantastic. She'll be more reliable than trains or Michelins, that's for sure. Stay tuned next. Jubes & Co. is up next. But first is your weather with Aidan McGibbon.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, welcome along to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. It is sunny out there for some, but for most it's a cloudy afternoon once again, and there'll be mist and fog forming fairly widely overnight, either as a result of cloud lowering or clear skies leading to formation of fog patches. We've got high pressure centred over the UK, but for the vast majority that does mean that it's going to be, again, largely cloudy heading into the evening and overnight. Still some drizzly showers along the south coast and increasingly some drizzly rain pushing into the east and central part of England by dawn. That accompanied by a lot of low cloud and mist. Meanwhile, for parts of Scotland, under clear skies, frost and fog patches as we begin Thursday. Certainly a chilly start for much of Scotland, with temperatures well below freezing in some sheltered glens, although eastern Scotland seeing a lot of cloud move in through the night, likewise for the north and the west. So here, frost-free, but it's inland where we'll see those frost and fog patches, some fog patches continuing into the afternoon. Northern Ireland, England and Wales, though, mostly cloudy, and the cloud lowering significantly across the Midlands, northern and eastern England, to give a misty, murky start in places.